Everyone, welcome to the Tuesday, January 22nd meeting of the Winchester School Committee. It's 6:02. We're at the Parkhurst School. I'd like to very quickly run down our agenda tonight. Public comment for any who are here tonight. We have a student report from Nate and Evan, our high school reps to the school committee. In the interest of accommodating some folks who are coming tonight for presentations, we flipped the usual order. We're going to pick up some action items first. Under Section 4, vote to approve a grant from Inca. And then we have a discussion on rental fees and energy fees. And Ms. Whittemore and Dr. Evans will share with us in a vote to approve. We have some minutes to approve tonight. We'll also review and approve a revised school committee meeting schedule if we're prepared to do that. And then we'll move into reports and discussion items. So we have a program of studies in draft form and a course of studies from both McCall and the high school for next school year. And our principals are here to discuss that tonight. We'll have a update on where we stand here at the end of design and bid for the McCall Phase 2 project. We have a number of guests that are coming for that tonight. Judy has shared with you in your packet a draft school year calendar for next year. We have on the agenda a policy subcommittee update, which I'll get back to here in a moment. We also have some discussion on resubmittal of statements of interest for the Morocco and Lynch elementary schools for the MSBA core replacement process, which that window has just opened up recently. And then we also have an FY20 budget development update. And then last, under reports and discussion, capital planning report from Brian. So before I move on these two items, the policy subcommittee, because Brian is not with us tonight, he actually got snowed out of Boston. So it's been suggested we table that for our next meeting, maybe a daytime session. So that's a good idea. So we will do that. He's aware of that. And Brian, of course, not being with us tonight, can't really give us the report, but he wanted me to share with you all that Capital is meeting again Wednesday night this week, and his sense is that there will be some significant change just from what he had already captured in his memo to the committee. So he's happy to give us an update when we next meet. So lots going on there, and thank you to Brian for making those meetings. Chair report, followed by superintendent report. We will review future agenda items and touch on next meeting dates before we adjourn. So, having run through that, is there anyone here for public comment tonight on an item on the agenda or not? Seeing none, Evan and Nate, would you like to come forward and tell us what's going on at the high school? Thanks for being here a little early tonight. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, this week is mainly midterms for everybody. That's our main focus. But just a quick athletics update. We have the boys hockey beating Malden Catholic 7-1. The boys basketball team beat Arlington Catholic 58-44. Girls hockey team beat North Quincy 10-5, and the Nordic girls team came in first place in their Mass Bay West League race recently. In other news, we have a new safety video made by Sergeant Pernick working with the Law Enforcement Club about securing valuables in school and in lockers.
The WHS Real World Design Team came in third place recently in Massachusetts in one of their state competitions, and so a big congratulations to Gianna DiNatale, Kevin Kagani, John Cluley, and Lene Casebear. Evan mentioned that there'll be, last week or 2 weeks ago, he mentioned that there'll be a vaping presentation tomorrow at the high school for students, and then later that night one for parents as well at 7 p.m. What Student Council's been up to recently, we've been very busy planning for Night of the Arts. It's a big one this year, the 5th anniversary, and so we're going all out. It's going to be March 18th, that's a Monday, and the theme will be Roaring 20s, so a Gatsby-esque night to remember, full of talented students and faculty, and plenty of fun. We've also been tackling, one of our big initiatives is the Artmosphere project, which is the mural project that I mentioned earlier this year. Our goal is to have student-made murals blown up and hung around the school. And so right now we have students working on garnering funding for that, and we're in the process of hosting open submissions for students to submit their artwork, and they'll be selected. Then move on, hopefully, to the next phase of the project. Similar to that, we also have a committee working with the athletic director, Mr. Aria, to hang pictures of WHS students while they're playing sports around the athletic wing, just to increase team spirit. And hopefully that'll be a nice system where as the students graduate, those pictures will graduate with them, so they'll get to take home a nice memento from their time at WHS and their athletic experience.
Great. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Evan. Questions for our student reps tonight?
Thank you.
I have one. Night of the Arts. What time do we think that starts?
6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Sorry.
And everyone's welcome to come.
Everyone's welcome. It's a community event. We're just starting to blow up our media and social networking presence with that. So it's going to be a big night. We're looking forward to it. It's always been great to see students and teachers come together to, whether they're singing and dancing or just displaying their photographs and drawings and paintings. It's a great night.
Good. Thank you. All right. If there's nothing else, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to action items. Vote to approve an Inca Society grant. Who wishes to speak to this? Judy or Ellen?
Jason Hachapuri, PE and health teacher at the high school. We're a grant to ENCA, requesting funding to purchase trainer AEDs to be used in his classes. So the students will be able to receive the same training that the faculty and staff receive use of new AEDs that are in the buildings. And this would be a great opportunity for the kids to get some additional skills in terms of life-saving measures.
So do you know, are these AEDs with a couple of extra bells and whistles so you can use them for training purposes, or are they only training AEDs?
They're
And
AEDs without the major components that fire.
okay,
So they're basically look like identical to the new AEDs we have. It's just missing a couple of the electrical components that actually make it work.
great.
And so how many are they getting?
So he will probably be able to purchase about 2 of them because, believe it or not, the trainer AEDs cost almost
as
the
much,
same
yeah.
As the regular AEDs. But Cardiac Science, the company that has that is manufacturing the AEDs, they were kind enough last year to donate one trainer AED to the school department, so faculty and staff could receive some training. And we're working with them to try and see if we can get some additional donations or costs brought down a little bit more for us.
And who actually does the training? Is it our trainer, or a few select
So
people here in the
trainer,
district?
Sergeant Paranick and
Okay.
Jason Mitchell will be doing the training.
Okay. Any questions for Ellen?
No.
Happy to take a motion.
I move to approve with gratitude the grant from the ENCA Society in the amount of $1,200 as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, Frida. Thank you. All right, and then we have 2 items regarding building rental fees and rental energy fees. I think there have been some questions on this, but I'll leave it to you or Ellen to introduce.
I'll let Ellen give you the details. I just want to say that she's been working hard to try to establish rental fees that meet with our goal of being able to support the custodial overtime or custodial fees associated with using the building that provide for some limited resources to replace or repair either equipment or furniture in spaces that are frequently rented, and to have a differentiated fee structure so that community groups and nonprofits and commercial users would pay different rates to keep the fees as low as possible for our community members. There's a component of the fee that has to do with energy usage that's kind of out of our control, that was set by the as an energy surcharge that was recently updated for the first time since 2011. The fee update that you're going to see proposal is was set in 2007, so it's been a very long time that we have not changed these fees, and so I think it was time to update them, and that's something Ellen's been working on. So I'll let her add any other details.
Can I just, a quick question of clarification, though, on the energy piece, although I understand there was a recommendation by Energy Management to the Select Board in the fall, and I think they voted.
They did
It
vote.
still requires us to vote. Is that not right? Okay.
Yes, it requires us to vote because it's school department buildings.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so on the, packet, I provided you with the current, rates for each of the categories, community, nonprofit, as well as commercial rates, as well as what the proposed are. There's some, additions, some subtractions in terms of trying to bring everything to as equal, a rate as I possibly could, get it. I did break out some, areas, especially with the elementary schools, and the middle school with the auditorium and the gymnasiums. In researching this, I looked at what other, neighboring towns were doing, and that, based upon the results from, that study, as well as through conversations that I had with both Peter Lawson and, Chris Conway with DPW, some recommendations have been made to, add additional, fees for use of the AV equipment, as well as stage sound and lighting at the high school. This would assist us in being able to, have some sort of a revenue source to pay for, repairs or replacement of equipment as equipment becomes, may come to end of life quickly. It's getting more use, with rentals, especially, the auditoriums at, Lincoln, McCall, and the high school. The other area that I was concerned about with, the fee increase is the custodial charge. That is a contractual obligation. We have to pay what the contracted rate is. And if you can see, the current rate is $33, an hour for regular overtime. And in fact, that is a $45-24 an hour charge now. So we haven't been absorbing, we haven't been recouping the full value of that.
Mhm.
So this is just to bring us more into line with what the current, rates are, as well as I would be looking on an annual basis to, receive feedback from DPW on the, AV's, stage sound lighting charges, as well as the custodial rates, to make sure that we are charging, the contractual
Sure.
rates.
Okay. So I just want to share with you all, although Brian is not physically here, he's trying to stream WinCam from an airport. So if I look at my phone, it's only because he may be firing questions through me. Just humor me.
That's dedication.
It is, isn't it? Okay, thank you. And should we, I think just for simplicity, can we take up a discussion on the rental fees separate from the energy
Yes, please.
piece? That might be a little simpler. Questions, comments for Ellen?
Yeah, if I can start. When you say remove in the afternoon school days, that means we're not charging anything?
No, it would mean that right now, the auditoriums, as well as the gymnasium, immediately after school, those facilities really are not available.
Right.
If they are, we should, instead of charging an afternoon rate, we should just go right into an evening rate. That would reduce the number of possible fees
Yeah.
we could be charging and put everything more into a streamline. When I looked at what other communities were doing, there really wasn't an afternoon school days, charge. And typically on a school day, our buildings we wouldn't be able to rent
Right.
the auditorium or the gymnasiums, because our students would be utilizing those spaces.
So remove the category.
Remove the category, and then if somebody did want to rent, have a rental start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it would just be considered an evening rental.
And again, you're just removing it for school days.
I'm just removing it for
Yeah.
school days.
And I see that some of the rates actually went down.
They went down based upon a market analysis.
Okay.
And what we were, what my intention was, that there were a couple of slight decreases.
Mhm.
And that was attributed to separating out the auditoriums and the gymnasiums.
Mm.
The auditoriums and the cafeterias, splitting them off.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions. It looks like you're going to retain the current structure of a community rate, nonprofit organization rate, and commercial
Yes.
rate. Do you mind just running through what those,
Sure.
who would qualify under those different
Absolutely.
rates?
So the community rate, historically, I've spent some time going back through our rental files to see who's been charged what over the past few years. And those are basically the groups that are Winchester organizations that service the members and participants, the majority of whom are Winchester residents and, you know, our students. That would be the Winchester Community Music School, the Sachem Youth Football and Cheering, Friends of Winchester, Dad's Hoops, those types of organizations that are comprised predominantly of Winchester residents and students. The nonprofits would be organizations that may not have the full participation of Winchester, majority participation of Winchester residents or students, but do have nonprofit status, like a Civic Educational Alliance, someone that has a 501c3. And that's going to be something I'm going to be taking a closer look at to make sure that we're, you know, we're categorizing groups appropriately. And then the for-profit and commercial, that's a category that I haven't seen a great deal of rentals with. Those are the corporations. Atlas Films came in and used our facilities about a year ago. That would be if, you know, if a major corporation like Google wanted to come and do something with us.
Which they obviously would.
Yes.
Why not?
Quick rejoinder from the assistant superintendent. To clarify,
Sure.
I'm glad Susan asked this question, so it reminds me a couple of things. So we have, I'm thinking of College Gate, for many years was our largest renter of space at the high school.
And College Gate has informed me that they will not be returning due to enrollment and space concerns that they have, so they will not be returning
To Winchester, period.
to Winchester period. I had noted that they previously were in 3 or 4 towns and they've scaled back only in 2.
Okay, but, and if they were to come back, they would fall under a commercial rate?
They would fall unless they provided documentation that they were a nonprofit.
Okay. And then I just want to clarify in terms of field use. We have field use policy.
Field use does not fall under facility rental.
Right. And so the one time I can remember when there was a private organization that still sought permission from the school committee was probably 8 or 9 years ago. There was a big concert that was held behind McCall Middle School, and I think they needed access to some parking and maybe some of the interior facilities, and big event, sort of like Relay for Life. Wasn't Relay for Life, it was something else. That did have to come to the school committee, but that's pretty unusual. Usually field rental would be just sort of strictly about the field or the court itself, right, outside the building. Okay.
Yeah, so, and then I just wanted to ask, like, you know, are we going to be losing users, and is this a significant source of revenue for us?
So the majority of the rentals, the bulk of the rentals we have now fall under the community, that I've been able to see from my review of the community. And it's a very small percentage increase when you compare the increases for community versus commercial. So I don't think that, that it will impact renters that much. And I've also have had conversations with a couple of the organizations already, and so that they're aware that there would be a small increase. And I'm more than happy to work with any of the organizations, you know, because a lot of them set their budgets for this year, last year, same as us, that, you know, that I'd be happy to work with them through their fiscal years and make sure that this isn't going to be detrimental to any of our community organizations.
And just one last thing, does this include, like, parents' associations?
So parent associations we historically have not charged parent organizations a rental fee. When parent organizations have their meetings, typically they have them during the evening shift of the custodian, so they're not charged any rate at all for their meetings. When they have an event, whether it be a fundraiser or something like that, typically what's happened in the past is they have been charged the energy fee and the custodial fee, but they are not charged any type of a rental fee at all.
Right, so International Night, I know,
Right.
obviously, there's a lot of cleanup that's needed.
Right, so there's a custodial fee, but that's all. I mean, we recognize and are so appreciative of all the hard work that the parent organizations do, that if there's any way that we can, you know, help provide them with space,
Good, okay.
we're happy to do so.
But that was my understanding, I just wanted to confirm it. That's good.
Before I go to Michelle, I just also wanted to clarify, the proposal is for these rates to be effective as of when?
I would like them to be effective as of the date of this meeting, with the understanding that if there is a group, a community organization that has a prior agreement with us for the remainder of this year, that we be allowed to extend those rates to them, with the understanding that I will be talking to them about the custodial rates.
Okay. So when it comes time for someone to make a motion, it might be clear, just to be clear, that, you know, effective today, with the exception of any, you know, any spaces already under agreement. Michelle, you have any thoughts, questions?
I just have one clarifying question. So these rates just apply to organizations or groups that are using parts of our buildings. If we had someone, there would be a different rate or a different contract if somebody was using an entire building. Is that correct?
So if someone were using an entire building, that would be correct, because typically, even with College Gate last year, they only used portions of the building, they didn't use the entire building. Situations right now that we have renters that rent Lynch, but they're not renting the entire space. They're renting X number of classrooms and and additional designated spaces. But if they were to look for an entire rate for a building, that would be something I would look at what each of the room costs are and work with them to make sure that we're providing a rate that is beneficial to the school department, but also isn't detrimental to any of our community or nonprofit organizations.
Great, thank you.
And one other thing just occurs to me, and it will probably come up in our McCall Phase 2 conversation later tonight, is I know you're aware we're doing some major work at
Correct.
McCall. So if there are, although we may have revised rates for some spaces, those spaces may be, as a practical matter, not available for a year or
Correct.
two. I'm thinking of the cafeteria,
Right.
at McCall and so forth.
We have already started looking, Pete Lawson, Chris Conway, and myself, we've already had discussions about building rentals for the summer.
Mhm.
Effectively, I've already taken McCall offline for the summer.
Okay.
And then we also have the probability of Lynch coming offline unless something significant happens at Capitol.
Okay.
With that, so we're looking to have those two schools offline for facility for any type of rentals this summer.
Okay. So I won't ask you now, but when we get to Phase 2, I will either ask you or James what the plan is for Cool Science Club this summer. But you don't have to tell me now. Save that for later in the meeting. How about that for a cliffhanger?
Questions to come.
Okay, so we'll get to the energy piece in a moment. If there are no more questions, is there a motion on the revised building rental fees that Ellen presented?
I can try. I move to approve the proposed increases in the facility rental fees effective today, with the understanding that Ellen will work with any organization under a current contract and as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
We have to do a separate for the energy surcharge?
Yes. Different animal on the energy piece. A little joint responsibility here, although there was a vote taken earlier in the fall. So Ellen, you want to talk about this, or is this Judy?
So,
Ellen can talk about it.
happy to. So the current energy surcharge fees for building rentals were set in 2011. Since that time, there have been no increases. Since 2011, electricity rates have increased by almost 12%. The Energy Management Committee also has cited the increased square footage at Vincent Owen and Winchester High School, as well as the high school being fully air conditioned, warrants the rate increase. Additionally, they have made some assumptions pertaining to electricity usage that impacts the rates. They're assuming that 7 AC hours per day will be used at the high school in the summer. That there will be 12 hours of electrical usage per day in all other locations. There'll be 16 days per month for town hall in the summer. There'll be 20 AC days per month at the high school in Lincoln in the summer, and then 30 days per month everywhere at all of the locations. They've also been able to go back with the Energy Management Committee and actually have been able to look at trends and see exactly where they're seeing increases in the rate in usage for electricity, and they've really done a wonderful job being able to really dig in and show where they're seeing the increases. So I think that the rates that they're proposing are in line with the increases that they've seen. And also through my research, I've also noted that other communities are also have similar types of fees for energy.
Mm-hmm. Right. Questions or comments on this piece? So the select board voted this September, yep. And on page 11, there's some buildings here that don't belong to us, but that's just because they're all kind of captured here. They fall under energy surcharge fee.
I guess I have one question, and I didn't give you a heads up about this one, but I'm just looking at this, and there are different charges for different buildings, and then the gym or the auditorium room, some areas are broken out. What does the general fee apply to? Like if you rent the whole building? I mean,
So I believe that that would be if you were to rent the entire
Okay,
building.
all right. Good, because it's a lot.
Yeah.
Actually, the general fee, actually, I'll have to get clarification,
Yeah.
actually. Let me get clarification from Susan McPhee on that.
Okay. Occurred to me looking at it again.
If that's for the entire building or just a specific area.
So we can follow up. Any other questions or comments, or is there a motion?
I move to approve the proposed increases in the energy surcharge fee as presented.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Okay, moving on to some minutes. So there are 3 minutes in the packet. I'm gonna ask that we table the ones on the 7th, just so we can capture the parliamentary procedure on those. We had actually continued the meeting for the visit to McCall, so that was sort of outside of a school committee meeting. Simple procedural thing, but we can fix that for the next meeting. I'll just to continue my comments here. So the top of page 17 in your packet, these are the minutes of December 18th. So Frida, top paragraph, that last sentence regarding what Karen said about WIFI. WIFI funded salaries and made a clear statement that there is a 0% chance that WIFI will not fund salaries in the future. So I think that's almost like a double negative, right? So she was saying there's a 0% chance that WIFI will fund. So I would strike the word not. And then second paragraph, Mr. Grinzebek stated that there are options. That was all that I saw in those minutes. And so if we move to, and then we had the public hearing on the 8th. That was a lengthy meeting, and Frida captured a lot here, but looked pretty good to me. Are there questions or comments on the minutes or other suggestions? And if none, I would entertain a motion to approve the December 18th minutes as amended and the January 8th minutes as presented. And then we'll pick up the 7th minutes at our next meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Moving along. Okay. Next item, revised school committee meeting schedule. I'm actually going to ask Judy to speak to this a little bit. Get to it.
So, as part of our discussions with the school committee about norms and protocols and how we can best do the work in a reasonable way without expecting members to not only attend at least 2 evening school committee members per month, but also subcommittee meetings, attend other board meetings or other committee meetings in town like EFPBC or Select Board, that we would consider alternating our meetings and having one evening meeting, one formal evening meeting that's more geared towards presentations and major decisions, and one more working meeting that would be held in the daytime, where the members of the public would be welcome to attend, but that it would facilitate getting some of the work done so that people could have some evenings for their families and other pursuits. And so this is a suggested schedule for February through June. We could try this out for a couple of months and see how that fits, and then propose a meeting schedule for next year that would work well for all.
And I think, what's not captured here is the exact time of these meetings. To the degree Michelle had suggested in an earlier meeting, to the degree we can kind of be consistent there, that's certainly good too. So I think we're not quite there yet, but if this generally works for everybody, we could take that next step. Although Brian's not here, he did tell me this morning he had checked his calendar and this looked good for him.
Do we want to say 9 o'clock for the daytime meetings? Does that generally work? Or do we want to double check?
Depends on the weather. I would not have been able to make a 9 a.m. meeting this morning, given the condition of the roads and the absence of crossing guards, so that may be a little early.
9:30? I mean, there may be days where there's a delayed opening or something like that,
Yeah.
but.
February 5th, I have a hard time until like 11:30.
Say that again, Zena?
On February 5th, for example, that morning would be hard for me, but midday would be better.
For my part,
So what should we do? Yeah.
I could do a 9:30.
I
The
generally
later
can.
morning meetings, which we seem to have done a few of lately, I think work well too. Maybe just because we're working to get done by lunch, like at 10 to 12 or something like that. I'm flexible.
That's the only one that I have a hard time because I've got a pre.
You already scheduled.
You already scheduled something.
Yeah. That's the only one. But otherwise, I prefer the 9 o'clock start.
Or 9:30.
Or 9:30, yeah.
What time can you start on the 5th?
February 5th. Can we say noon, 12:30?
12:30? I'll
I
double
would
check
have to,
with
I
Brian.
could try for 11:30. Is the earliest.
Let me check with Brian on that one, and then try to have the other 4 at 9.
Yeah, 9 would
propose.
work.
We're saying
It's
9:30?
9:30.
9:30.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
The weather may dictate 11:30 on February 5th anyway.
Is it?
So let's talk about the evening meetings for a moment. 6 o'clock, is that a preference for folks? My sense is actually 6 is more difficult for Brian in the fall, but we're not looking at a fall schedule. We wouldn't have to stick with 6 throughout the whole year.
Sure. You want to try for 6 for this?
It works for me. We have fresh heads making bigger decisions later in the evening. Does that
Well, and
work
if
for
it's
everybody?
6 for only 4 days,
Yep.
that might
That's
be
easier.
doable also if it's
Yep.
not if every meeting isn't in the evening.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
have to say that, for people who might want to come, members of the public, 6 is when you're feeding your kids, so.
Speak for yourself.
My kids feed themselves, so just remember that whole
You're making me feel
getting
guilty.
out the door, for something. No, there's a lot of things to balance.
Some self-effacing humor on my part. You know it. So do you feel like we should maybe stick with 7?
Yeah. But
Would you
I
be more
defer to
comfortable with
everybody
it
else.
if we guaranteed to do public comment a little later and
Maybe.
did gifts and student reports and things up front between, like we are tonight, between our 6 and 7?
Yeah.
Well, there's one other piece to this too. Remember that part of our interest in picking up these alternating daytime sessions was to pull some stuff off the evening agenda so that we
Right.
weren't sort of pushing so late.
Right.
So to be fair, if we really
It's
stick
nice
to
to be
this,
right.
then we're. Wow.
You're welcome.
Tina, well played. We won't put that in the minutes.
Sorry, I was trying to add to my calendar.
Oh my gosh. So anywho, like I
Yikes.
was saying,
Yeah.
take some things off the evening agendas for a daytime session, then we should be better able to start at 7 and kind
Yeah.
of keep our steam going.
Yeah.
So 7.
If there's something, and remember too, we're going to have some other action coming in the way of collective bargaining for 3 other units. So there's an opportunity, maybe an executive at 6, regular at 7, when and if that's necessary.
Yep.
So I'm inclined to sort of weigh on Susan's side here at 7. Maybe makes sense. That's certainly what the community sort of is accustomed to.
Yeah.
Sure. A lot of
Okay.
it
I'm
depends on
good
the
as long as it's
members.
consistent.
Yeah.
Some folks with younger children may actually want to get home earlier, put the kids to bed.
that's true too.
So, knowing we can always revisit this when new developments come our way, it is an action item. So is there a motion to approve the schedule as presented with our daytime sessions at 9:30 a.m. and evening at 7 p.m. with the exception of February 5th?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll send you a revised schedule.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Lynn is here, Mr. Mahoney is not, but we're flying along. So perhaps we could, let's move around in the agenda a little bit. Judy, could we talk about the draft school calendar for
Sure.
next year? Would that be
Happy
all right?
to. So you may recall that one of the stipulations in our teacher's contract is that we do make an effort to confer with the teachers regarding a draft calendar, which has been accomplished. The draft calendar that you see is mostly complete except for some of the half-day early release days and final choices of our 2 PD days that will happen within the regular school calendar, still finalizing those. Jen and I need to just be sure that we're aligned with what other districts are doing, and that makes sense. The major change from the norm in this calendar is that in exchange for having a longer break in December, January, the teachers have agreed to come back before they're contractually obligated in August and complete 2 days before Labor Day. Friday is a no work day, no school day. Then Monday is Labor Day, the 2nd of September. We've also had a change to increase our instructional time at the elementary level. This calendar has all elementary students have a half day on the first day, which is Tuesday, the day after Labor Day, but only kindergarten students on the second day. You might remember that we had more grades coming in for half days for more days in the past, and now we're just sort of jumping right in and starting the year, except for our youngest students. The other changes in November, we are planning for a professional development day on voting day, which is the 5th, because there have been some concerns by principals at the schools where there is voting that keeping students safe when large numbers of unknown folks are in the building is sometimes a concern. And so it would be our preference to move voting, would be the principal's preference and my preference to move voting to other locations and not have it in the schools, so that we would not have concerns on this level. But there is an advantage because many other school districts have professional days on that day, and we share resources with them and send our teachers to their programs and vice versa. So that would likely be one of our full professional development days. And the most favorable outcome if you do vote this calendar is that we will have 2 full weeks off beginning Monday, December 23rd, and not returning until Monday, January 6th. We could technically return on the Thursday and Friday after New Year's, but there's a cost to that, opening the buildings again, heating them again, for 2 days when a lot of families may choose to extend their break through traveling, and there would likely be low attendance on those days. And so the January break is for a full 2 weeks, 10 school days. February vacation and April vacation are per usual. We're tentatively putting a professional development day in March, the date to be determined. I've got a placeholder Friday the 13th, lucky Friday the 13th, Jen. But we can still talk about that. No school day in May, obviously, is just Memorial Day. So the date with no school days, and I think there's one little extra cloudy day here, Frida, maybe, that everyone would get out, would be the 18th of June, half day, last day of school. Teachers come back for a full day on that Friday. And if there are snow days, you add as many little cloud days as you need to make up for the days when you've had snow days.
Thank you.
So, can I just hear you say again that the teachers are coming back before?
Right, so when Labor Day is early in September, the contract says the teachers don't have to come back until after Labor Day. So this would be an agreement between, and if you voted this calendar, we would have a letter of agreement between the teachers union and school committee saying teachers agree to return the previous week in exchange for the 2 full weeks off in December and January.
I have a couple. Are you?
Go ahead.
Okay. So if, in the end, June's 18th and 19th, if there are snow days,
Yep.
you'd no longer have the early release and the no school? Or would you keep pushing those out till
No,
after?
it's hard to put a snow day in. So always what happens is the last day of school is a half day, and the next day is a professional development day for the teachers. So say we had 3 snow days, students would just go full days until that 3rd day when it would be a half day, and then the teacher's full day would come right after that. So it's
Okay.
hard to show it all there, but the greatest number of snow days we would plan for is 5. That's required. So I think the latest day we would get out would be the 25th.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
At worst case scenario. And and one of the things Jen's been exploring is blizzard bags or some form of replacement.
Curriculum.
curriculum, learning, experiences, so that, I think we're still away from resolving that issue, Jen.
Yes, because the DESI is looking at their guidelines and approvals and all that around it, so we don't want to create something that could be in contrast to what the requirements could be.
Do they happen to have a timeline on that? I know, it's
Only we need to
DESI.
comply with the timeline.
Timelines seem to be for other
Yes.
people, yeah.
Just
Yeah,
curious,
and they
because a
do
number of
have-
districts have piloted them.
Yeah, they do have guidelines right now, so we could certainly do something. It's just that if those change, then we have to change everything, and
Right.
nothing's more frustrating to people than,
Changing twice
yes,
or 3
Yes.
times. So.
in a rapid succession.
Right.
So the, so I guess, I would guess the only risk would be in this calendar is getting out later than, a little bit later than we would normally. like
And
to.
am I correct that if we went those 3 days in January, we're still gonna have school into the week of the 15th, because we'd have to go at least that Monday?
So actually, what would happen is the PD days that are the week before would move into the first week in September. And then students, we'd still get out later because, the start of the school year would be pushed later.
Right, so we're still gonna, no matter
gonna
what,
get-
we're gonna have to go into
Yeah.
that week in June,
Right, right.
no matter which way we choose.
This is true.
But just to continue that train of thought, Michelle,
Mm-hmm.
so if there were no snow days as presented, the last day of school is on Thursday. So if we go back to that January, if Thursday and Friday are a school day, you're basically picking up 3 snow days in that week, right?
Well, no, the 2 days the teachers are coming back would be moved to September 3rd and 4th. And so students have to go 180 days, so you'd still be pushed out a couple of days.
Because, as you were alluding to earlier, because you've already had some initial conversations with WEA leadership about sort of horse trading on this?
Exactly.
Okay.
So if we're in school on January 2nd and 3rd, then the teachers will come back after Labor Day.
By contract.
By
is-
contract.
I
that's-
understand.
There's no incentive for them to come back before Labor
Okay.
Day. About a third of them would prefer not to. 2/3 would prefer to, if we could have 2 weeks at the December-January break.
So I'd like to come back to Election Day in November. I'm going to play dumb because I don't know what offices would even be on the ballot. I'm thinking,
Not an
my gut is,
even-numbered-
what's that?
It's not an even numbered year, so I don't know.
I'm,
Yeah.
Good
question.
as strange as it sounds, I'm not even sure there's an election then. I'm struggling to understand what it would be. So is that maybe something we could circle back with Mary Ellen about?
So there's always an election. I'm not sure whether there are any major
Because there might be
offices.
initiatives that are brought forward, like, right, there might be questions.
I mean, it's the second Tuesday.
There are state offices, I'm
the
sure.
first Tuesday.
There are state
every
elections,
year.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
always,
They're
there's always an
Well, it's-
election day.
Like I said, it feels like a dumb question to ask. I'm trying to imagine what it is, because
I'm pulling it up.
Ellen's gonna
I
pull
was
it up.
doing it too.
I think Brian had actually reached out to Mary Ellen about this, because he couldn't find information either, but I don't know that she'd gotten back to him on it, but,
Really cut into the Parent Association
Snack selling.
Yeah.
fundraising.
Yeah.
No bake sales.
So I want to offer to, the committee that our practice in the past was that Election Day was a school day, and we made it a no-school day when you had a major statewide election or a national election, like a presidential election, when we expected high turnout. I don't think that'll be the case for next November. And I struggle with, in my mind, if there are specific concerns around safety, for me personally, I wish I could understand that a little more clearly, and maybe that's an offline discussion. Speaking for myself in Precinct 1 and 2, we have uniformed officers there from the Winchester Police Department, and I like the fact that our community gets to vote in our schools, because I feel like for those who are empty nesters or have really no otherwise connection to the school, it's actually wonderful to walk in and see a building that's well-maintained, whether it's brand new or it's old, and to see the student work that's on display. And I feel like it helps to sort of engender some goodwill in a community that we ask all the time to support us. And hopefully that'll happen in the spring, with a debt exclusion override. Parents, I think get it because they're in the school or they're hearing from their teachers a lot. They kind of know what's going on. So for me, I think it was always a good thing. When I was a kid in school, I liked the fact that we had set up the voting booths, but I realize it's a different day, different age. It's just my own personal opinion.
Well, just a couple of thoughts on that. The large numbers of people coming onto school property, parking, entering the building, always provide concerns about school student safety. Students are outside, students are in the playgrounds. Generally, there are limited number of uniformed officers and multiple exits and entries, and so teachers and students have to be pretty vigilant. In addition, in some of our schools, we lose major spaces that are instructional spaces or lunchrooms. If we had Saturday voting, I'd be all for having it in the schools. Tuesday voting seems to be something that is a tradition, but for me, it's a safety issue, and I think every superintendent in the state would feel the same way, that this is not worth the risk. There are multiple elections during the year. There's a town election as well, so we are in school on that day. So people do have a chance to see our schools in action, I guess, on that day. The other issue is that with the additional professional development days, we have to put them somewhere on the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can share resources with other districts on a day when a lot of other districts try not to have school, that seems to make sense as well. I wish we could go back to the days when we didn't worry about people coming in and voting in our schools, but
Yep.
It's something that is a concern to me.
And
And I
Jen,
think
my-
I see principals nodding as
My
well.
memory is that, once upon a time, the PD day had been in October, but we moved away from that. Hi, George. We moved away from that because it sort of seemed like maybe we weren't just ready quite yet in October, right? November's the right time to do this.
Yeah.
Right?
Teachers feel like, right, they're getting in like a rhythm, like they're building those structures the first 6 or 8 weeks, so feels a little bit more comfortable. And for me, the big drive is the PD piece because we save a ton of money, and we've launched the NPEN, which had like 1,800 participants, which was awesome. And that's a joint collaborative between a bunch of districts that we all commit to that day being off, so.
Okay.
There is no election, state or federal or anything, on November 2019.
Unless they're a special,
No.
unless they're a special
The
question.
Secretary of State doesn't have anything scheduled, like it's not even part of the
No,
big
November
calendar.
election. Wow.
It's 2020. So, does that change what we want to do with that day?
That's a great question. Jenna, can you
Well, it
confirm?
sounds like the consortium of.
Sounds like the
No,
consortium
that's-
has already booked that
We
day.
still always just stick to that day. That's everybody's plans.
Yeah, so that's a good thing to know, though.
Yeah.
So there is no voting that day.
But this town obviously has September and March.
Just March.
March.
Just March.
Just March.
Okay.
There will be primaries, but there's no
Primary September,
Right.
yes, but
There
nothing
aren't
in.
always primary.
Sorry, yeah.
So,
civics, yes.
Judy,
I know,
there's
right?
No, we need to refresh our memories on that.
So you're not asking for any action on our part tonight, and Brian will, I'm sure, stream this when he gets home tonight in all the detail, and give you some feedback.
So if you were ready to
separately.
vote, we could vote it as a preliminary calendar so that I could let parents know,
I think they'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
if there are no major issues.
I move to approve the calendar as presented.
I second.
Is that, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like,
So before we vote on that, let me just think through. So our practice is when we vote at a calendar, we look to set the beginning of school and the end of school, because for obvious reasons, parents are interested in that. This coming year is particularly interesting, given those Wednesdays for Christmas and New Year's Day. It sounds like, Judy, you're pretty confident about everything in the middle, the PD days, the vacation days. Looks like this is pretty well thought out.
We
You've
have
got,
addition of a few half days that we need to put on here that aren't on here yet. but-
all right, so before we vote, I'm going to ask a question. Speaking of, somebody mentioned DC earlier. High school graduation. My understanding is the coordinated program review had some findings in terms of seniors' time in the classroom. We don't typically call out when graduation is. I don't know if that's a practice we should change. I think for some families, maybe with multiple kids, there's an expectation about when graduation is. I think from most families, they don't know until their kid goes into their senior year. Is that something that we should call out on this calendar, and or how do we address the CPR feedback from DC? Is that a separate conversation?
Dennis can speak to that.
Would you like to join us?
Should I come up or should
Sure, come up, just so people can hear you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Dennis?
I do realize that the coordinated program review did cite that our seniors might be getting out a day or two earlier than what they would like to see. I just object to it. I think and that's my professional opinion. I think most high schools in the state of Massachusetts, most public high schools, get out or have the graduation almost on the exact same day. It's usually the first Sunday in June or Saturday or even Friday in June. And since most schools start within 2 or 3 days of each other, I'm guessing that this is a very common issue that most schools are not directly addressing. So that's my stance. I don't think we need to really focus on it at this time.
And so,
So the first Sunday is
Because we
just the 7th.
so because we're calling out important dates for our youngest kids, you know, the kindergartners, and we split them, I think, alphabetically. So first half of the alphabet, day 1, second half, day 2, and you're still showing that, Judy. Graduation's obviously a big deal for our high school seniors. Can you talk about what goes into sort of figuring out when that happens? Is graduation the kind of thing we couldn't even really pin down from a date point of view in a
Technically not.
calendar?
We look at the first weekend in June, and we walk backwards from there. That's every high school I've ever been at, every high school in the area, it's typically the first weekend in June.
So technically, if we were to fully comply, it would be the second weekend in June, if we're getting out with 5 snow days. It's from the last day of school scheduled for the students, and so it really should be June 7th. The choice would be May 31st, is it? May 31st or June 7th, and I don't know that we've ever graduated in May.
No,
So-
I'm not in a hurry to do that either.
Yeah, so I think June 7th is the most likely date of graduation.
And correct me if
I
I'm
was just
wrong, but
gonna
it's
say.
just not something we typically have on the calendar.
Not as a date that's marked, but
Everyone,
it's typically not difficult to pin down.
it's sort of announced at the high school. I
Right.
mean, people know in the high school
So you're,
realm.
I'm bringing it up because we typically don't put it on the calendar, and I actually don't know that we always know when graduation. And I know that
Around this time, we start to talk about graduation festivities, graduation week, senior activities, and we email out a tentative timeline to all senior parents and families.
and I'm bringing this up. I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I remember in your first year with us as high school principal, when the graduation date was announced, I think you got some blowback from some families who had expected it was going to be on a certain date, and I thought to myself, maybe what can we do to sort of announce that earlier? And
Blowback was not on the particular date. People wanted an outside graduation because the previous year we didn't have a building
Gym,
facility to
yeah.
have the
Graduation,
typical
yeah.
graduation. So after 1 year, people assumed we were going to always have an outdoor graduation. That was actually my preference. And I definitely spoke too soon, not realizing all the things that go into
Yeah.
an outdoor graduation in the town of Winchester. Where I previously came and where I graduated from, we had always had an outdoor graduation. But typically those schools have a field directly adjacent to their high school. We do not, so our tradition is inside the field house, and that's the tradition we maintain. We actually pushed for that first year to go outside, but then of course it was threatening rain, and
Yeah.
we just knew what we had to do.
So my memory was there were some families who were sharing with you travel plans that had been made and tickets that had been purchased to take trips with their new graduate, and that those were in jeopardy. And so I thought there was a schedule issue there. So I may be misremembering that.
I definitely lived through it. And
Okay.
so just
So
to,
that's why I raise it, Judy. Is
Yeah.
that something that's worth putting on a calendar? Susan's right. We don't typically do it.
Let me be clear that people definitely did make travel plans, and they do that every year. But the graduation is always the same time, and this time of the year, we always announce when the graduation is.
And we can't work around people's travel plans. I think this is set, and I think that's something.
so typically,
Based
you're not
on
supposed to
Bessie.
vote the graduation calendar until closer to the end of the school year,
Okay.
because it
the
can't, it
rule
has to be
being-
a certain number of days before, and if you're able to go earlier because you haven't had snow days, then you could technically change it. So in my other districts, we waited until sort of March
Got it.
and voted, which doesn't leave people a lot of time for travel plans if they're traveling for a high school graduation. I think we could count on having it on the 7th and be safely within the range of 14 days or 14, 15 days, whatever the
I think it might be 12, but I don't
12
know.
days that before the end of the year. It gets to be complicated because some portions of senior week don't count as days for students. So senior's last day of classes, from then forward, you have to count 12 days to the end of school. So it could shift senior week as well. So if you're going to comply
Right.
to the strict letter of the law, you really can't vote graduation day until after you know how many snow days you've had. So, but I think we could
So
count
that's
on
key.
this.
That's key. Why
We
you
could
can't
count on
do
the right. We can count on the 7th pretty surely, I think, though, and start planning for that.
Okay.
If we're going to have it on a Sunday.
Could we, this is just a preliminary calendar though
That's
too,
right.
because we also don't have on the conference days or
Right.
the other 2 PD days, so all we're voting tonight is a preliminary calendar. So
right.
once that's set, if we decide to put graduation on the calendar at a later
Yeah,
time,
we
we
could do
could.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even asterisk it and say potential graduation day.
Right.
Okay. So, thank you. We had a motion and a second and plenty of discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. So I think Meg White's going to be joining us any moment on the McCall piece. So let me just, to stall, let me just pivot to FY20 budget development. I don't know if we have, do we have anything in our packet? I don't think we do.
We do not.
Okay, so, so I just want to share with you all a couple of things. First of all, the public service announcement is there's a community forum, is that how we call it? For Thursday, 7 p.m. at Winchester High School. So we encourage everybody to attend. I know WinCam has been notified. Judy, I think, has shared, I don't know, have you shared with the full school committee? You've been working on some slides.
I should share it with you because I haven't had feedback
Okay.
from
So
town
just
manager.
hot off the press, Judy was just getting some information to me today. The superintendent has a part of this, as does Lance as chair of the select board, and our town manager. Roger will be representing capital planning. So some updated slides, similar to what you've seen at town meeting and some of the state of town working groups. Updated information from when Lance was here in December. So really looking forward to that. Hope people will attend. I've had some conversations with the town manager about how to get some information from her that kind of follows, I'll describe it kind of as this binary way to describe the override. So Lisa, I think, kind of took Judy's format from our public hearing on the 2 budgets and is now kind of presenting the impact to different departments based on a yes vote or a no vote. And so Susan's worked very hard on an FAQ page for an informational website. I've gone back and sort of just restructured it so it kind of reads in that very binary way. So kind of department by department, key bullets. This is what yes means, this is what no means, but with links to other places for information. However, having said that, the town manager has asked that we not kind of make any of that public just yet because, as you know, she's working hard to get her numbers down to where she's comfortable for Thursday. So my hope is that we'll have something that we can announce Thursday night, show the community where to go to get for information. And, you know, knock on wood, that'll be ready to go, but that will be just a dynamic thing. So as more information becomes available, we will just continue to update the tool as we go. That's all I really want to say about it. Judy, do you want to say anything about your ongoing work with Lisa on this?
No, I've had several conversations with her. I think what we're trying to do is be as clear as possible about the 2 options. What happens without an override, what happens with an override, and what is the impact on services. The impact on taxes or the total dollar amount is sort of beyond the purview of the school committee or the school department. I've really focused on the impact on our budget and what will happen should we not get the resources that we need to continue to move forward.
So I want to thank everybody for your continued presence at a lot of these meetings. I know many members have been at select board meetings as they continue to kind of get their head around this request. My sense from their last meeting on the 14th, where they discussed this at length, was my sense was the entire board understands the need for an override. A couple of members, I think, are struggling with the size of the ask, and in particular, there's an understanding that either with no override or with a no vote, we're looking at an austerity budget or a cut budget. There is an understanding about what a needs budget represents, and fundamentally, it represents people, because we're a growing town and we're a growing district, and we have to add people. I realize that for at least one and maybe two members, there is an interest in what it takes to just kind of keep doing what we're doing now. Someone has even called that a basic budget. So I want to just acknowledge that those requests are out there, but I want to underscore once again what this committee and the superintendent has said, is that the budget that we voted, our needs-based budget, is not a wants budget. It is a needs-based budget. And Judy herself has indicated that I think in every year you've been here, there's been at least one unfilled position from what we had intended due to some unanticipated cost increases. So what we voted is really a way to, if you will, catch up to some lost opportunity, as well as to build in for the future. So that's really important. I want to throw it up to anybody who has anything they want to add or questions you may have about the process or thoughts that maybe I didn't touch on or Judy didn't touch on.
I just wanted to clarify, is Finance Committee still sort of involved in analyzing this as we go? Because typically they get a budget and then they kind of vet it afterwards, but we were trying to accelerate the budget calendar this year. And it's my understanding that the chair and folks on the education subcommittee of the Finance Committee are involved in staying abreast of all of these changing numbers. Is that accurate? Are they going to be at the thing on the 24th?
So they're not listed as presenting, but I'm certain that they'll be there to answer questions. I know that they've been working closely with the town manager to help her get her numbers in order, and that they've invited us to come and meet with them and present our school budget on
February 4th, 7:30 p.m.
February 4th at 7:30 p.m.
And that just came in this afternoon. The reason FinCom is not listed as a presenter is, and we've talked about this before, they feel very strongly they need to be kind of agnostic about all this. They want to react to what's being presented, but they are very much plugged in. I know Sam Allison continues to meet with members of the select board and the town manager, and Matt from FinCom continues to update his models. The note that I'm just looking at my phone here, because the email I got today from the vice chair of FinCom, they're appreciative that we accelerated the budget development calendar, and given that we're now a little further ahead than we are, they're ready to kick it off, as Judy mentioned, on February 4th. And pardon me here while I read this. So they are preliminarily anticipating that the Finance Committee will vote on both budgets, the override and the austerity budget, on February 25th. They realize the actual budget from town manager does not come out officially until February 15th, but it seems like town manager is keeping our school budget sort of steady in her calculations, and due in large part to all the time Judy has been sort of spending with Lisa and sharing information. So I think we're in a good place. Again, happy that everybody was okay with accelerating the calendar, because I think it positions us well. Okay, so enough about that and enough stalling about FY20, because now we have a full crew here to talk about McCall Phase 2. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry.
Why
yeah,
are
question.
we skipping program of studies for?
We're going to come back to it, but we got some people here to talk about McCall Phase 2, so we're just kind of jumping around. They were going to be here between 7 and 7:15.
Should we let our principals go?
I know, because they've been here.
James is involved in this presentation too,
okay.
so I don't think this will take terribly long, but I'd like to invite James and Meg and George Cruz to come forward and join us.
It'll take one.
Dennis is ready to give James all sorts of advice about working through a construction project, I'm sure. So thank you all for being here today. So the purpose of this request is there have been a couple of questions from some members since the last sort of fulsome update we really had on McCall Phase 2 was early in the fall. I think George, you were at maybe 90% construction documents. We were reconciling estimates. There was discussion about add alternates and a lot of work, of course, at the EFPBC table. But given that design is complete, and I think we're posted on Central Register.
It's currently out to
bid.
So there's a lot to kind of report on, so this was an opportunity to just talk about what's been accomplished on the project. And I want to introduce Meg White from Engineering and Planning. This is George Cruz, who's a principal from Flansburgh Architects. He's principal in charge on the expansion project. George was also the leader on the master plan team. He was a part of the E-Wing project in 2008, as well as the previous master plan. And of course, James Lynn, who's our principal at McCall. So, you have at your table some responses to some questions on everything from finance on the project, budget, reconciled estimates, add alternates, some scope questions that we may refer to during the meeting. In addition to the McCall project itself, you will remember town meeting approved, it was $500,000 for traffic and safety studies, and given what was left over, so even some improvements. So that's not really part of Flansburgh's scope, but Meg is very close to that, and she could speak to that tonight as well. So I open it up to you guys in terms of who wants to kind of go first and tell us where we are, and then I can open up for questions.
Okay, so I'll just start with the schedule. We are, as Chris said, we are currently out to bid. The filed sub-bids are due tomorrow, although we may extend that. We had a last minute question today from a contractor, potential contractor, that we felt was important enough to delay the sub-bid opening. So we're working that schedule out tomorrow morning, but it'll be probably Friday. And then the general bids are due on February 7th at 10 a.m.
So I know you haven't opened anything yet, but are we getting some interest and things coming in the mail?
We host our plans on Accent Blueprint, which is a
Online
hosted site that all the contractors contact them. We get a list. We can see the list all the time. We have there's been a lot of plans and specifications pulled by both general contractors and all the filed sub-bid category contractors. I don't know the exact number right now, but we felt pretty good about them when we last looked at it. So I can't say how many will actually submit a bid, but
Okay,
a lot of people have pulled them.
thank you.
You're welcome. George, I don't know if you want to address some of the questions around the scope,
Oh, Frida.
some of your questions that you had, Chris.
Take a little bit of a big picture, so, the McCall program was really a result of the master plan, which basically between 9 and 10 classrooms would be required at the middle school level based on the enrollment projections that are coming through. So the first phase 1 was 3 classrooms in the lower wing under the gym, and then 6 classrooms in this addition to sort of take care of that enrollment issue that's coming forward. So we spent a lot of time with the EFPBC on a design. We had a subcommittee on design as well. Came up with the addition, if anybody's looked at the plans and the renderings, something that sort of blends between the older wing and the E-wing and sort of tries to tie those two together and in a sort of, 21st century manner. So all the schools were kind of contemplated as being 21st century. So that lots of technology, lots of capabilities to move the rooms around and have different teaching styles within each classroom. The cafeteria expansion, which was required because of the additional population, also doubles as sort of a teacher workspace, conference space, program space. So there's literally idea paint where kids can write on the walls. There's a big projection screen that comes down. So it's a learning environment. It could be a teacher area for advanced learning and just bringing in speakers. So that design was vetted out, put together as a set of contract documents, is out to bid. We've been really responding to a lot of bidder questions. So we've had a lot of questions, a lot of interest. Hopefully the results will be coming in early next week. The file sub-bid piece, if everybody doesn't know, it's Massachusetts kind of unique to the rest of the country. Although we have to bid a general contractor, we also have to bid about 14 sections of the trades separately, and then the contractor can choose any one of those accepted bids in his bid to try to be the low bidder. And in Massachusetts, you have to take the low bidder. There's no other option.
And they can also choose to exclude one another, isn't that right? So this is part of why
they've had a bad experience.
Meg enjoys this process of making the marriage work,
So
right?
There's a lot of politics on the contractor level at that point. And so when we get those bids in next week, we're probably gonna realize about 48% of the actual bid, the 7.35. And hopefully, we're a little under, and we've done our job, and the project will move forward, and then on February 7th, is it? We'll have the final bid, and we'll be able to go through the analysis of that bid, go to DCAM, evaluate the low bidder, make a recommendation for the EFPBC to move forward contracting with that contractor. Hopefully that all works out in a nice linear fashion. The other questions I think are really here. We have worked with the school and the EFPBC to try to come up with a phasing plan that'll work, where we're going to try to stay out of the school until the end of the school year. And then there is a tremendous amount of work to try to tie in the new building with the existing building at the cafeteria level, as well as the end of the E-wing. So there's a tremendous amount of work to be done in that summer, as well as trying to get the teacher's workroom done in that summer. And then have all the contractors out of that building in September with all the temporary protections in place. That's our goal, and then let them continue to work on the outside. As the responses that having regarding the site, we sort of have a site plan and where the contractor's lay-in area, parking area is, where he can stay during school hours. Once he's here, that may need to expand depending on the scope of work that has to happen in a certain time frame. We certainly will have advanced knowledge of that and be able to relay that to the principal, so let him know what impacts there might be on the school day at that point in time. We have tried to include as much information as possible for MCAS testing and those kind of things, and trying to keep the contractor as quiet as possible in those particular times. So I think we've done everything we possibly can do with putting together a package that meets both the school's needs as well as the town's needs and the contractor's work on site. So they don't make rubber hammers. It's gonna be noisy at times. There's gonna be a backhoe outside. We know that. We're just trying to make everybody aware of it. So as he develops his schedule, we'll be able to give everybody a 2-week look ahead, so we can try to stay on top of that and make sure everybody understands where the contractor will be at a certain period of time.
And can you touch briefly on the 3 ad alternates that we were left with at the end of the day?
So the 3 ad alternates, the teacher's workroom, which was part of phase 1, moved into phase 2, and then to try to sort of belt and suspenders to make sure the main project can move forward, we took the workroom and created an ad alternate. That way, if the bids are on target, but the workroom can't happen, then there's a discussion that has to happen, but everybody wants the workroom to happen, so that's why it's number 1. The hydronic heat, so the EFPBC was a little bit concerned. The E-wing does experience some heating issues, you know, when we have low temperatures like we're having now. And so it's been an issue, and that was because it was really on the tail end of the existing boiler system when that was designed. We did not want to tie into that system, so we designed an all-air system. So there was some conversation that they would like baseboard heat in those classrooms. So we did design a separate baseboard heating system, not tied into the existing boiler, has its own separate boiler for those 6 classrooms. And if we can afford it, I think the FPVC would prefer to have that enhanced heating element for, you know, additional comfort for the students and staff. And then lastly is an ongoing conversation. The existing tables in the cafeteria have lost some of their cushion on the bottom, so they have a ring of steel, and over the years we've got impressions in the flooring. So this was an opportunity to try to see if we could capture the cost of what it would take to replace that floor. And you know, if we have a great bidding environment, we could afford all 3 alternates, that would be ideal, but at least we would have captured the cost of that floor so that we can look, if we can't buy it now, we can certainly look at buying that in the future.
Right. Thank you.
And with that, we'll probably also need to take a look at the furniture itself at some point, rather than putting old furniture on new floors. So.
Sure. So, George, the school committee we did a walkthrough with superintendent on the 7th of Phase 1,
Yeah.
and which looks terrific. The connector's done. There were a few elements there in that space, so I brought it up on the screen. I think we've got some temporary construction there. Maybe we're going to go back and put in some windows with Phase 2, almost like some temporary panels on the exterior of the building. And we have some sets of doors in there as well. Is it fair to say part of Phase 2 is to sort of go back and clean that up?
Yeah, Phase 2, the windows that are facing out onto the fields in the parking area were plywooded, and they were originally in Phase 1, but because of some cost constraints, we decided to move that cost into Phase 2. So right now it's temporary plywood, but it is in the bid for Phase 2, so the contractor of Phase 2 will be removing that plywood and putting in new windows. The plan for the doors, what you have there now is what is going to remain. So unless there's a design change that you feel is necessary to remove some of those doors, it would either be a change order or facilities would have to take care of that.
Okay.
So what the door situation there is now is what everyone has gone through and discussed and has been left in place. So doesn't mean it can't be changed, but that's where we're at with that particular contractor.
And Judy, can you and James talk about how you would be involved in this project once we get a contractor on board and things start happening on site? And Ellen would typically have some involvement as well. We get some projects, some site meetings going. Or you feel like you'd be meeting weekly, more regularly? And maybe somebody could say something about the whole project delivery, concept. This is not a CM at risk job. We're going to do traditional design bid build.
So we currently have a request for proposals out to hire a part-time owner's project manager, as well as a full-time clerk of the works. Clerk of the works will be on site every day monitoring the actual construction. The OPM will be responsible for kind of tracking the schedule, the costs. I am the town's OPM, so I will be working very closely with them, as well as the EFPBC, as well as Flansburgh, the school, James, anyone that he wants to appoint as well to that. There will be weekly job meetings on site. Everyone will be invited to that, and then there will be either weekly or I don't know exactly how many times the EFPBC will want to meet during this construction period, but it could be as much as every Wednesday night. So they will also be involved on a regular basis, and we're happy to have anybody else. We can come back to the to this board anytime and update you as we move along.
So my thought is, thinking back to the high school, there were so many things that the community was sort of reacting to in Phase 1, because that was obviously the shock to the system. I think the community kind of got used to some activity as we went forward, but communication, I think, to families is really key about kind of what's coming, particularly if it's going to impact spaces or if it's noisy or what have you. But I think once we got going on the high school, I think that actually worked very well. I thought communication out to families was excellent. There were concerns I know the neighbors had about construction vehicles that were coming and going. We're going to be erecting steel here, so I can imagine vehicles coming in and out may draw some concern of neighbors of the school and so forth. So again, I just think following the model we had on the high school, I think will put us in a really good position. I know there were some questions about traffic and safety piece, or do you want questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
There had been some discussion about when you would start and whether you would be doing some of the site work early before the end of school this year.
Between April and June.
Yeah. Is that still in the work or?
I doubt there'll be any site work per se.
Okay.
I think what we'll do is allow the contractor, and it's been specified in the documents, to allow the contractor access to the building to do exploratory work after hours, after 3:30. Get in and look at the utilities, look at all the electrical work, look at their workspace, begin to set up their laydown area, which is the area as you come into the back, the lot there. To the right is the skate park. So the skate park and then the area along the sidewalk up to the circle right now have been called out as a potential laydown area. Once we have a contractor on board, we
we get out there, we actually see, he sees what it's like every day with the buses, with the parents, with the teachers. That laydown area will probably get massaged a little bit just so that it works for everybody. As part of the specifications, we had Tool Engineering, who is the traffic engineer that we've hired to do the larger traffic study. We had them look at the trucks coming in for deliveries, 18-wheelers, how much space they would need to make that turn, how many spaces we would have to make that happen. So we very seriously looked at that, but I think the final area will be determined once someone's on board. So I think we'll allow them to get some of that set up without maybe having to take, I mean, it's gonna be a little bit of a work in progress.
Yeah.
So we might not have to take any spaces until June, but it depends on when their deliveries are gonna start coming in and all of that. But we'll know a lot more once we have someone on board.
And will that impact the field, the turf field and the
No,
track and all that?
So part of the contract requirements is to allow pedestrian access at all times to both fields.
Okay.
We will have to very carefully evaluate that as we move along. Our number one concern obviously is safety. So if at any point we feel like people and construction is too close together, we might have to reevaluate that as well. Now, luckily there are other access points to the field for pedestrians. It's not ideal, but coming off of Manchester Road, coming off of Mystic Valley there, we're hopeful we don't have to make any changes like that, but again, this is, safety is a number one concern and will obviously involve everyone in those decisions, from the school to the athletic director to the DPW to, town manager's office, everybody.
And James, I take it you get the pleasure of communicating to teachers if things change in terms of, assumptions around laydown areas and means and methods of construction, because there's teachers, obviously you have places to park during the day, may have to be creative.
Yep, we're already having conversations about that. Yep.
Okay, good.
And McCall graduation is on the field typically. Will this affect this year's McCall graduation and access to the field?
Did you hear that question?
Good question.
I'm sorry,
We'll
Dan.
talk to the contractors.
Yeah.
Events like that are typically one-off events. We can make arrangements to have no work being done. That's before they're able to get started full steam ahead. So I suspect that shouldn't be an issue, but that will be one of the issues that we'll bring up. So one of the things that we'll be working with James on all the time is tell us what you have coming up the next 2 weeks. What testing, what, graduation, the 8th grade, I think, is that the same event? They have the 8th grade dance. And
Dance, yeah.
Dance
graduation
after the
the next day.
graduation, yeah.
Okay, same day. So those kinds of things, we'll be working and coordinating all those logistics with James every week, every day.
And so just,
I saw Dennis's hand go up back there.
This is an alternate site during inclement weather, the 8th grade graduation is held at the high school field house, and so that would always be available as well.
Thank you.
Particularly for that class of kids, that would be a neat opportunity, right? Susan?
I was just gonna say, ask, just globally, if the project starts in June of 2019 and then it's finished in September of
August, like 22 of 2020.
2020, okay.
Actually, that's the day my daughter's getting married, sorry. It's actually August 19th of 2020.
Big date.
I'm writing it down.
Thank you, yes.
So speaking of events, so I'm going to come back to Cool Science Club. So there's some summer activities that are often in McCall, so we have that. That's like a district science summer camp. It's always been there.
So the plan for this summer is, last summer we were fortunate that because of the construction that was going on, we didn't have to take the entire building offline, which is why Full Science was able to stay. I've had conversations already with Pete Lawson as well as Chris Conway, and we are working on coming up with a plan as to anything that had been housed at McCall last summer and in previous years where we can shift it over. If we're looking like we're going to be looking at Lincoln as well as the high school for to take a little bit of a programming. My gut is saying that we'll probably go to Lincoln for whatever we can move from McCall.
Yep.
I'm just trying to keep it the same geographic proximity and not add any additional stress onto the high school because they'll be hosting other district summer programming as well.
Special education.
Got it.
special
Right.
education will be housed over, the plan right now is for that to go to Ambrose. We do have, another whole program of, summer programming that's offered through,
Enrichment.
Richmond.
So that's EYP we're talking about in Ambrose?
EYP will be, housed, it looks like right now at Ambrose.
Okay.
And, rec department typically, uses Lynch as well. Those two programs tend to piggyback each other just because we're taking entire buildings and, you know, putting something there, and then DPW is able to schedule their summer training around that. So it looks like we've already had preliminary conversations with the rec department that
Great.
they know that they'll be going wherever our extended school year goes.
Okay. Terrific.
So unless there's a significant change with Capital's plan for Lynch this summer, then
Right.
that would be the only.
Have to do the abatement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Zena, I don't want to miss you. Okay. Any other thoughts from you guys?
No, we'll certainly, the EFPBC is meeting tomorrow, so there won't be any new information there, but then they meet again on the 6th. So again, there won't be any final
Before the
information. And
7th,
as soon as
right.
we get the bids in, we'll let everybody know where they landed, how it's looking, and,
Yeah, we're gonna work, hand in hand with James, so when we do have a contract on board, we'll actually start putting all the middle school milestones in that schedule, so everybody knows what's coming up. I think that we've done that successfully in the past, and I think we can do it here again, so.
Well, I want to thank you all for your hard work, as well to Judy and Susan as our EFPBC reps. I'm thinking back to the, what?
We love it. The
Well, I know you do. I know you do. That's why you're going back tomorrow night. So I just want to make an analogy that the previous master plan, which was a 2006 master plan, just like this one, called out some really urgent priorities that needed to be addressed immediately. There were some midterm priorities, longer-term things like the high school were out there. And those short-term priorities back in 2006 were modular classrooms for Morocco and Ambrose. That was the nature of the lift back then. So it's very exciting we're able to pull off what is a permanent solution very thoughtfully at McCall. It's a very tight site. I'm very excited for these spaces and what they're going to mean to the students, what it's going to mean to the teachers, and I think in some respects we're sort of making good on some needs in a way we were sort of creating back in 2009, because when we built the E-Wing, it was just primarily classrooms. And, we've continued to grow as a district, and there's all the other stuff you need, right? Whether it's spaces for teachers or space for our growing athletics department. And we've been struggling with the situation with having almost no bathroom facilities for our large public events on Manchester Field. So this is really going to do a lot for the students and for the community. So thank you all for everything you've done to make this a reality. It's very exciting. Thank you guys very much. Really appreciate it. So to Zena's point, James, don't go anywhere. Shall we bring up Dennis, talk about program of studies and course of studies? Would that be all right? Dennis, you want to join us back at the table? And who would like to introduce these items?
I'll be happy to. We have accelerated the process of developing these program of studies, the course of studies for both the middle school and the high school, because we wanted to be sure that we had rough course descriptions for the proposed new classes that would be made available for students, particularly at the middle school in world language, in performing arts, and some other minor changes, and then at the high school, primarily the new performing arts courses. The work that is done on the program of studies throughout the year is a collaboration between individual departments, 6 through 12 departments, K through 12 departments. Jen does a lot of work on it in terms of looking at curriculum, and then Dennis and James take over and produce something that parents and students can use to select courses for the next year and kind of plan ahead where they might be as they move through the years in grades 6 through 12. The most challenging part, I think, about making sure that a program of studies makes sense for us and meets our needs is looking to innovate, looking to remove barriers to entry, looking to move towards more heterogeneous grouping, all of the things that Jen and I have talked about numerous times at previous school committee meetings, where what we're trying to do is transition a very, very traditional approach that has worked well for many students and families and has not worked so well for others, that has not always supported our goal of improving social emotional wellness, because of the high pressure that our students feel to succeed so they can become eligible for the next course. And so sort of changing the course of direction that we're moving in as a district has been slow and somewhat painful. And trying to convince folks to open access, to encourage risk-taking, to minimize tracking and leveling, has proven to be more challenging, I think, than some of us would have liked to have seen. And so Dennis and I have had a lot of conversations about this. James and I have had some conversations about this. Certainly there are still things in here I would like to see changed. And again, this is the first draft. If school committee members feel similarly, we can certainly give Dennis and James feedback, and they can go back and work with directors on some of these things. Because we have had such a highly successful school district for so many years, and most of our students have done incredibly well academically, the pressure for change has not been felt by the people closest to it, and that's the teachers. And so I think we are seeing some movements towards change, but it's not as quick as we'd like it to be. And so that's sort of my preamble to, I'm sure, a lot of your questions, which would be, why is this still in here? Why are we still leveled and tracked to the extent that we are? How are we going to transition in that direction? And Jen and I had a conversation about it earlier. I think it's hard for the two of us to speak directly about this because we are much more of the philosophical bent that we should have open access, that we should have less leveling and tracking, and that it will not hurt our students, it would only enhance their overall experience. But convincing the folks who work on a day-to-day basis that that is the case has proven to be more challenging. So, and that's not only teachers, but also many parents and some students. So, so that's sort of the preamble to it. Would you like to start with McCall first?
Whatever your pleasure is, I defer to you.
So I guess the other question that folks might have is, do we include courses that will only run if we have an override, and why? And absolutely we do, because we will never know how many people want to take them unless we put it in here and ask them to select the courses. And if we fail to have our needs budget and have to make significant cuts, there'll be lots of things in here that won't go, because we won't have the teachers to teach those either. And so I don't know what those are yet, because they'll be completely determined by sort of prioritization and, you know, what, how can we get our students on a pathway towards graduation, you know, to sort of meet the minimum expectations. That's where we'll be without our needs budget. So with that, James, I don't know if you want to start and sort of summarize your changes or take questions.
Sure. Do you want me just to talk a little bit about the changes that's happening? Okay.
We have a sheet in the packet, James, on draft edits. There's 6 or 7 bullet items, but feel free to touch on these and walk us through it if you like.
Sure. I'll just talk about the ones that should not have any impact on the override. The first one is the sciences. And so we just changed the language to the 3 courses. As you know, 3 years ago was the first year that the 6th grades started to be aligned with the new frameworks, and then this year is the 7th grade, and next year will be the 8th grade. So starting next year, all 3 levels of science classes will be aligned with the state frameworks, and so there won't be earth sciences in 8th grade next year. It will be all integrated. And so therefore, because of that switch, we also will not be leveling any of the science classes. So all 3 courses will be heterogeneously grouped. The other change is really a language change, which is the math classes. We just want to make sure that the way we describe the progression of the courses is aligned with what's actually happening. So for example, pre-algebra 7, initially in the first, And what's in the programs of studies right now says that any students can move into Algebra 2 in 8th grade, which is just not the case. Realistically, they can't, but the thing is that students will need to take additional courses in order to catch up on the materials that did not learn. And so we clarified that in our diagram that we have and also in the description of the courses, again, just to reflect the reality. Let's see, we also made some changes to the band percussion. This is the first year that we have a separate percussion course, just because that group and the rest of the band, it's a different instrument, and so it's a different course. They perform together, but we find that having different times for them to be able to practice is much more appropriate. So it's just language change to reflect the program that already exists. The two areas that will be dependent on the override were obviously the world language. And so we adjusted the program of studies to reflect the fact that there will be 6th grade world language, including Mandarin, and also the drama classes that we're hoping that we will be able to run with an additional 0.5 FTE.
Okay.
So those are the changes that we have.
Before we turn it over to Dennis, can I take questions or comments on the middle school piece?
Can we talk a little bit more about the math progression at the middle school for a minute?
Yep.
So you had said that some of the language had been changed to reflect the reality of the programming. You mentioned one area. Can you talk just a little bit about that specifically?
Right, so currently what we have, if you look at the diagram, actually describes that a little bit better. In the current program of study, what we have indicated is that Algebra 7, student that's in Algebra 7 in 7th grade will be able to move to Advanced Algebra 2. The reality is, yes, they can, but we want to clarify to the parents that if there is this progression, that the students may have to take some summer courses, because in Algebra 7, they're not going to cover certain topics that in 8th grade in Advanced Algebra 2 that the teacher assumed that the students has already learned. So we want to make sure that the parents, when they're reading this diagram, don't think that if I were to have the students move from Algebra 7 to Advanced Algebra 2, that it will be that transition that the students can basically just go. We want to make sure that the parents understand that there is a chunk of materials that the students did not learn the previous year. So if they do wish to move to that class, they might have to do some additional work over the summer or at the end of the school year.
And so is that work that is actually going to be more, is it May, or is it more expected and required that they are going to do work?
Well, they will have to master certain content, and so it really depends on where the student is at the end of that school year. So to your question, there will be contents that they would not have covered, but certain students, they might pick it up very easily. Because they have developed very quickly at the end of that 7th grade year. For some students, they might really need to take another course and review all that materials. So it really depends on what that student is, and so that would be the conversation that the 7th grade teachers will need to have with that student and that family at the end of that school year.
So is the onus going to be then on the teachers of the 7th and 8th grade math classes to then identify those areas for kids that need to move up, or will it be on the parents and kids to figure that out for themselves?
Well, I think it's, I envision that to be a collaboration. Also, we have to take a look at what is the situation. So for example, in Algebra 7 student, if the teacher, that 7th grade teacher says that I really recommend Algebra 2, but a parent or the child says, I really want to challenge myself and be placed in Advanced Algebra 2, and the teacher saying, something at this point, I'm not very sure that is my recommendation because you are missing this content. And so that, if that situation happens, it'll be up to the teachers and the family, and perhaps involving me as well, that we might have to set up a plan that we can mutually agree and say, you have to do X, Y, and Z, because if you don't, then you are going to struggle in Advanced Algebra 2 because you just haven't mastered this content. Or it might be something that a student that is really close and the teacher says, something at this point, I can't really tell. I have some doubt about the suitability of advanced algebra 2 for a child at this point, but you might want to review because, you know, maybe the last couple of units, it's really, you know, a B minus, B plus work. And so when you move into a class, the pace is really going to pick up. So you want to look through all this material. So again, it all depends on where the student is and
Right.
what their desire is. I think you have asked a question previously about ability for students to choose. And the reality is, in this process, the teachers make a recommendation, but if the child or the family truly feel like this is where we want to go, typically we don't stop them. And that conversation when I have with the family is, well, this is the reason why the teachers did not recommend your child to be placed in that, not because we don't like your child, it's just because we don't feel like it's suitable for your child to be in that class. But again, if you really want to do that, we certainly honor that, and for some kids, we encourage that. Why not? Challenge yourself.
Right.
But you also want to make sure that both the student and the family knows exactly what you're getting into. I think it's really upon us to make sure that both the family and the student knows that these are concerns, and if you have a good plan to address those concerns, then you certainly have our blessing to move into the level that you feel like is suitable for you. Because you know, we don't know. There's some kids that can really pick it up over the summer, especially in the
Right.
middle school years. You know, kids change so quickly.
And so are we also being clear, though, for kids that are recommended to move up, what content area they have missed
Absolutely.
before they get to the next level as well?
Absolutely.
Because what if you have a particularly competent student in Algebra 2 who's recommended to move up, but there might still be content that they're missing? Because from this diagram, it looks like we're asking kids to choose in 7th grade pretty much what math they want to do at 9th grade. So we're starting to track kids for what math, which makes it challenging to move up at later levels. So now we're asking our 12-year-olds, 11, 12-year-olds, to decide what kind of math student they're going to be at 9th grade.
I don't disagree with that. I think that is the conversation, I think, as a whole district from 6 through 12 we need to have, because you're right, if our mentality changes at the lower grade, let's say in 7th grade, and yet the 8th grade courses is still designed to be this way, then the kids are still going to be stuck in that, that track, exactly, or even just for a year, but next year it's still going to be the same.
There's still going to be a gap.
There's still going to be a gap, so it really has to be a systematic, you know, from 6 through 12, we had to take a look at what does this look like. And yes, on the diagram, it looks like they can move, but the reality is there's really not a whole lot of movement. But again, it has to be the entire 6 through 12 teachers, the entire department with collaboration from the directors, really thinking about what is it that we want our math programs to be throughout the entire 7 years for secondary education. And yes, I mean, that is a conversation we are planning to have, both Dennis and I, and the math director and Jen as well. We're planning to have one next year. This year, it's just really difficult to have that conversation because we also don't want set the teachers up to fail if they're saying to us right now, we just don't know how to do this.
Right, and I noticed we've gotten rid of the tracking in science now, which is nice too, because then the kids have every opportunity when we get to 9th grade. But just so that the diagrams and the descriptions are clear to parents, so they know what they're choosing for the kids too.
Exactly. I think with science, I think the stars are aligning. It happens to be the time that we are shifting into a set of new standards. We also have 3 new teachers coming in to look at this with fresh set of lens here. And so they're ready to make this transition. I think with math, it's much more ingrained. And just like Dr. Evans said, it's also about educating parents as well. So they don't feel like that because we are not leveling. If we move into that direction, that we're not lowering their standards. In fact, we're bringing up the standards. So there's a lot of education that we'll need to do, not just for our teachers, but also for our parents as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would like to see in your statement of commitment to policy of non-discrimination, I would like to see gender identity included.
Okay.
I think that's something that would be important. I'm ignorant of the middle school. I only have elementary school kids. So can you please, what happens in a 5-minute homeroom?
We actually part of it is about making sure that the students have information that they need for the week and also for the day. Starting last year, we actually started a new program that we call Quiet Reflection. And so it is a time for kids just to calm themselves and prepare themselves mentally for the rest of the day. Some teachers actually have them take out their agenda books, and this is not time for chit-chatting. This is not time for going online to play games. This is a time for you to take a look at your agenda for the day and prepare yourself. So for example, is today gym day? So if that's the case, that's the time for you to think about, do I have the materials that I need? And so during homeroom, it is the time for attendance taking, so we know that the kids are here. It is time for us to make important announcements, even though we try to decrease that amount of time so that, the more information you share with them, the less they're going to take in.
Right.
But we find out that it's been very helpful for the kids to have about 5 minutes, 6 minutes just to center themselves and be able to focus on the day.
My other thing, I think this is in line with what Judy was saying, but I'm surprised at the social studies curriculum. I feel like it doesn't really reflect our world and where we want our kids to be thinking. Yes,
Can I
ma'am.
pipe in on that one? So there's new standards that are just released, that'll be K-12. We've sent a team to go to the consortium group to look at what we're doing with that, so there will be a shift K-12.
And do you feel like it's moving us in the right direction, all this new
Well, there's a
stuff?
whole year dedicated to civics, so that's new.
That doesn't
grade,
take
right?
care of what I'm talking about, but great.
Yeah.
Is it culturally responsive and?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, more so than the older ones.
Is it truly representative of the world and what's happened, and not only the winners but the losers and all of those?
I think
rich
it's more what you
conversations?
do with it, because there's plenty of the right content in the frameworks. It's more how you implement it as a district. But it was great today because one of the teachers who's on our team that's kind of part of this consortium with a lot of districts was talking in a different training today in a performance-based workshop this afternoon about how what was so awesome was the DESE was even talking about that it's not about covering the material in social studies anymore. It's about
Nice.
thinking about these larger concepts, and it's about, so that's even coming from them, which is the first time ever, especially around the history frameworks.
Yeah,
Because
because I
it's
would
been a
like to
lot of
see more
coverage.
problem solving, more,
Right.
critical thinking, because
Yep.
if you're just reciting historical facts, that's not doing anything for
Absolutely.
Okay, and my other question was, I was also surprised by the computer technology education. Is it where our kids are technologically speaking? I mean, do they find these these classes rich in content? Because they're so advanced. I mean, my little guys are already, zipping
Programming your
through
house.
practically. Not quite, but yeah.
If
I mean, is this
anything,
meeting
I
it?
think we need to teach a kid to scale back. I think because they're moving so fast, I think what we spend a lot of time teaching is, are you really processing the information that you're getting? I think, looking at my 6th grade son as well, even my 2nd grade daughter, it's click, 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 click through. I think a lot of what we're teaching the kids about internet safety, are you just clicking yes without really clicking, what do you
Kid
mean?
has a
What did you
Facebook
just
account
agree
now,
to?
apparently.
Right. and
I'm getting
also-
notifications.
Exactly, and social media as well. Yes, we all know kids know how to use social media apps, but you really thinking carefully about the information that you're putting out there, the way that you're putting the information out there. So, is this a fun course? I think this is a
don't care if
course
it's
for
not.
kids to really think about what they're getting themselves into. This is really not a course about, do you know how to use this app? Because I'm very sure they do, but do you know how to use it well? And do you know how to use it in a healthy manner? That's why I'm seeing a lot of kids coming up to us. They may not have thought about that. And some parents do not even recognize their kids are doing that.
So they're being taught how to not only put out information, but also to take in information, to
Correct.
critically think through it and go to the proper sources and stuff like that. Okay.
Exactly, like
Awesome.
Wikipedia, you can get a lot of information, but most of them are not true.
Exactly. Okay, great, thank
You can
you.
decide
And
if
also just-
BuzzFeed's a real news source or not.
That's the debate of the year.
And the tech ed courses, those are actually part of our science standards, and they're not taught in the science class, they're taught in those courses, so it's important.
Oh, I
'Cause
like
they
that.
are assessed on those, and we expect them to go with those skills to the high school, so.
Perfect, thank you.
Questions or comments, Susan?
Can we just go back to the math diagram? And it just seems like you've had a lot of conversations with a lot of parents, and the teachers have over the years. And, you know, I think you're putting this please note in there as a kind of flag for parents. I'm just wondering if you might want to add, you know, reach out to the teacher or, you know.
Yeah,
Additional coursework is sort of like vague, so
Right.
I don't know if you would
Right,
consider
and-
making that a little more. I don't want to force you to have more conversations, but just to
I think
to be
those are the
clearer.
information that we give out when we're talking about when we're talking with our current sixth graders and seventh graders about the recommendation process and also their requests, because there'll be a couple that will disagree with the recommendations, and the conversation and also the process that will involve in changing the child into another level. And so those information will be built in there. The reason why I hesitate to put in more information is because each kid is different, and each child's reason for wanting to place into another course is very different. So for example, there's some students that might be ready, but they lost 2 months because they had a concussion, right? So that's a situation that's very different than a child that has been present for the whole year, but, you know, just takes more time to process through the materials. They're capable, but they just need more time. So the needs of those two type of kids are very different, so it's hard for me to prescribe into a program of studies what might a child need in order to move from this course to this course.
I was just saying, you know, in terms of communicating with the parent who might be reading this.
Yeah,
Yeah, but sounds, yeah.
I understand. Thanks.
The goal long-term is to have an integrated math program in the middle school and not to have a progression that's a typical algebra progression. And actually, algebra is a misnomer here because they learn a lot more than just algebra.
Yeah.
So we started at grade 9, and the intent is ultimately to move back through the middle school and have an integrated math program with fewer levels. The challenge in Winchester comes because there are a lot of kids who take advanced math courses outside of the school and put a lot of pressure on the middle school to progress those kids, you know, to calculus at age 11. And so it's, in some ways, we are crafting a math program around the needs of 25, you know, super high achieving kids who are progressing very rapidly instead of, you know, a program that allows for a lot of flexibility and movement within an integrated pathway. And certainly the goal is not to have 4 levels in 9th grade ultimately, but to have, you know, 2 levels in 9th grade. I am pleased that the STAG course gives the same basic core curriculum to everyone. And it used to be some kids would go to geometry and some kids would go like a completely different course that had no connection. So at least here, everybody's going to basically the same course, except that Math 109, which is for this, you know, super high achieving math students. So, you know, it's a compromise as we sort of are transitioning, I think, in math.
And is your sense it's about 25 kids?
For
Strike
the
you as
math.
about right?
Yeah, these are the kids that really live and breathe math. They love math. This is what they do. So I think one of the things that the teachers and you know, going through this process, and you know, I've been told that they do a very good job of helping the parents understand what each one of these levels means, and the fact that just because Algebra 7 is placed in the middle doesn't mean it is not a rigorous course. In a lot of other districts, Algebra 2 will not even be in 8th grade. It will be in freshman year, same thing with Algebra 7. So what the kids are getting are really challenging courses. It's just, like Judy said, here in Winchester, we do have that, you know, 15 to 20 kids that live and breathe math. This is what they love. And so it is very challenging to put them in a typical Algebra 7 course when they have already, you know, been exposed to this material.
Okay. Susan, anything else?
Nope.
So I'm gonna share. I had the opportunity to talk with Brian earlier today while he was camped out at the airport. His he has an interest or concern about representing some elements of this that are override dependent, and I think other members have at least either expressed that or asked that as a question. I have to say, I'm in that camp. I totally agree with Judy. If there's either no override or there's a no vote, there could be many things in both this book and Dennis's book we can't do. I totally understand that. But I do have a concern about putting something out there to the community and then having to sort of explain it later about why we're not doing it. And given how you've prepared the bullets and you talked about those first two as just sort of being explicitly override dependent, while I think creating two different books would be, a chunk of work, and I agree with you, not really necessary, I wonder if we can't highlight, this was Brian's suggestion that I wanted to share with everyone tonight, is to maybe in italics or something, just identify that these courses are being planned by the administration. However, they are dependent on, fill in the blank. They're dependent on approval of we gotta be very, I'm pausing because we have to be very careful here, right? The district can't be kind of seen as advocating for someone or how they should vote, but I feel like we need to be very clear about what is and what is not dependent. So if we're gonna do something new and it's exciting, finding a way to call that out as being just dependent on the override vote or some supplemental funding, I think is important, because if that should actually not be successful, none of us are gonna have a good day, but it might help your burden just a little bit, because you'll be able to say, that was, sorry, but it was clearly in the book.
Maybe Judy, James, and I can get together and come up with some common language.
Common language,
And
yes.
just put it in both books.
So my first question would be, do these books go out to parents before the March override?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
They typically do.
Typically do, that's what I was just
They have to,
wondering.
because James has got to, set his sections and
It'll be
determine.
on my website in early February.
Okay.
Yeah, so we do the course approval process and the course selection process well before the override vote.
Okay.
So we'll have to regroup if we have to make cuts after that, but I'd rather be optimistic and have a clear sense for how many of these courses will go if we can staff them, particularly at the high school level.
For
And
us,
how much
it's-
interest you'd have then, too.
Yeah.
The high school level, it's just, the drama courses were the only ones that would actually be tied to the override. The rest of the courses are electives and or going to run, which would mean larger class sizes, but they're going to run,
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
unless there's no interest.
Right, for us, typically this comes out around April. That's when we start having the conversation about math placement and also selection for world language for 7, 8. So if the override's happening around March, I think we'll be okay.
I think it would be helpful to have the conversations about the choice of languages earlier, though, so that we get a sense for whether or not we have enough students who are interested in Mandarin.
We actually have done that with the help of the elementary principal. So we do right now have a good sense of what it's going to look like, what are the interest level for each one of the 4 languages. So as soon as we know whether these classes are going to run or not, we're going to schedule them accordingly. In fact, we're scheduling right now with 2 scenarios, one with 6th grade world languages, one without. So we'll be ready to go.
So Mandarin was listed under 7th and 8th grade too, though, wasn't it? Would 7th and 8th graders have the opportunity to also
no.
start? No, only with 6th grade. Okay.
In subsequent years, they will. And that's what happens when you add a language. There's no way to have
I wasn't sure with our
beginning-
proficiency-based
Yeah,
model
I mean,
if that would
maybe we
change.
could, the year after the first course, depends on how many kids sign up for the first course. James and I have talked about having kids cross grade levels and teams based on a proficiency model for language as we move up, so that students who have some native proficiency or have done their own study or just want to accelerate through can move and be able to pick up a second language in high school, as opposed to sort of staying on the same path as everyone else. So
On that note, James, can I ask you to look at page 12? So I think this is where I got confused too. I see grade 6, French, Italian, Mandarin, Spanish. I turn the page, I don't see grade 7.
Yeah, I think that must have been what I did
Oh,
too.
maybe a missing page.
Did we miss a page, or was there a header that dropped off? I think we're missing a,
Well, what's that paragraph above?
Looks like we're just missing a page. It could
Yeah,
be
I think
us.
we're
We could have
missing a
just, could have
Or just a
misprinted.
paragraph?
well, but it goes, the page, we're going from page 12 to page 13, so I'm not, I
Right.
don't think we're missing a page. I think some content is gone, or,
Just missing.
There might just be a course description missing in there, James.
Yeah,
We can go back and look
You're
at
right, I'll take a look at it. No, the some graders will be taking.
Oh, yeah,
world
well, no,
language.
I get that, but I mean, to Judy's point, if there's to be a motion tonight to approve, there'd be a couple of amendments, things like, standard
Thank you.
language, identifying override-dependent initiatives, and then it's fair to say your description of grade 7 world language will be similar to what you already have today.
Exactly.
What's really different is adding Mandarin.
Correct.
I also just want to offer to the committee, Judy has been very consistent that every time when she talks about her recommendations around world language to introduce a non-Western world language like Mandarin, we've not actually voted that specifically, but Judy's been very consistent in that recommendation. The school committee, I think, we voted to provide Mandarin at the high school, 8 years ago, maybe, and we really sort of struggled, because that was actually at the end of the pipeline as opposed to the middle of the pipeline, so there was some early interest and enthusiasm. It was hard to keep going. I think we did like an online program, right, with Middlebury or something?
Yeah, I
Still
can talk
do.
about that when I present.
Okay, so I mean, for me personally, I'm supportive of it. I just want to call out to the committee in approving this, we're sort of making it official. It is Mandarin, which Judy's been consistent about from the very beginning. Then I have just a instructional material question. So I want to ask about Spanish. So we use a college-based instructional text, Descubre, which has its strengths and weaknesses. There's money attached to instructional materials. If we're going to bring world language down to 6th grade, and the same, I mean, my question might be applicable to French and Italian, but my kids take Spanish, so I'm not sure how it would track. Are we still using that college-based instructional material for grade 6, or does this vote mean, do you have something, Judy, in the needs-based budget
Yes.
to buy new materials?
Yes.
Okay, and then is that for grades 6 through 8? Are those new materials that go into the high school? How does that work?
So you might remember a couple of things. The World Language Curriculum Review was a pretty thorough review and did a lot of surveys, and the recommendation from Mandarin was supported by the surveys from the World Language Curriculum Review. So it's important to remember. The second thing is that when you introduce another level of a language, especially if it's not an exploratory, but it's a core, everyday kind of study in grade 6, in the subsequent years, you need to make adjustments to 7, 8, 9, et cetera, as students are moving up and they have a different skill set and different proficiency. But as Michelle pointed out, as we're moving towards a proficiency-based model, we're moving away from sort of Descubre, even though it's a high-quality program that has, the traditional textbook and workbooks and supplemental materials, teachers are recognizing that a proficiency-based approach requires a lot of teacher-made materials, a lot of current materials garnered from countries where the language is spoken, and so you're using materials that are relevant and not like when I took French and we were studying African countries that no longer existed that spoke French because the book still said that country was this country. So, right, so it was a 20-year-old book. So,
It becomes a history class then.
exactly. So, I think the question is, there are continuing costs for materials and professional development curriculum renewal as a result of putting 6th grade world language in.
But might benefit all of our grade levels.
But, right, that would help continue, support continuous improvement in our world language program. So, yeah, so there's a certain amount of money set aside, whether we buy some combination of, teacher-made materials, other instructional materials, or workbooks. Not a big fan of workbooks, but for some, they work well. For some purposes, we've provided for that in the budget.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sure.
So, if there's no more comments, Zena, you have one more thing?
It's a broader question for the new person at the table. Our role as school committee when it comes to courses, because Chris just said something about Mandarin not having been approved, isn't that under your purview? And then we look at the entire, can you tell me what my job is?
So that's very interesting. That's a good question. I think you could ask 5 school committee members and they'll all say different things.
Right.
So typically,
I'm asking you.
The specific content of courses and the sequence of courses and curriculum renewal is all part of the responsibility of the directors and Jen as the assistant superintendent. And the program of studies really, I think Typically, we've approved both middle and high school program of studies, but you have not approved anything on the elementary level. So the changes that we've made in the elementary level, we haven't discussed those in detail here, typically in the past. It may have happened before I got here, if there were major curriculum changes. What I would say is you are approving these in concept, but not to get too much in the weeds as far as specific wording or things. Just because school committee members don't have the capacity to understand every content area, the way Jen can, given her job and her length of experience here.
I'm sure I understand it all.
Just say you do.
She works hard. The other place where you can approve or disapprove is the money. So if you approve the budget and it includes teachers to teach Mandarin and materials for those teachers to use, then you're approving Mandarin. If we got into a situation where one of you wanted to teach Arabic and another wanted to do Latin and another wanted to do, I don't know, Finnish or something, it could quickly get, devolve.
Right.
And so I think really what we're looking for is feedback and approval in general of the direction we're going. And the reason I started with a little soliloquy at the beginning about tracking and leveling and, sequence of courses is that philosophically, I think there have been some school committee members in the 4 years I've been here who have wanted to open the gates a little bit and let more people have more encouragement to take risks, to have access, and that those gates have not opened as wide or as quickly as we've wanted to. And so that's why I had the soliloquy at the beginning, because I recognize that. Jen recognizes that. Dennis and James both recognize that. And we're working towards it. But we still need you to push us a little bit on that front, because you are speaking for the wider community in terms of what the community's values are and what our program of study should look like. Does that help at all?
Yes, it makes me think that we need to have more community-wide conversations as a school committee on just the philosophy of what their expectations are for public education.
And part of it's an education effort, because all of us went to school. We think, it should be what it was like when we were in school.
I'm hoping
we don't
it
have a
isn't.
frame of reference, and
Or the opposite.
it might have worked for us
Right.
because we were good
Exactly.
at school. It doesn't always work for all students now, and
I
so
did
that's
fine,
the,
but I
yeah.
So, and Zena, can I just clarify too that when, I want to be really explicit, I do support Mandarin,
Oh, I know you do.
but I think Judy has been very careful all along to say, I really recommend a non-Western world language, like could be Mandarin. There have been some in this community who've asked questions about other languages. In particular, I've heard a lot of questions about how about sign language, and I know I think you've heard some of that, but there are some purposes around your recommendation for Mandarin. So
There are
really-
cultural things too.
yeah, and so there are really two things we do to make this happen. One is, once we vote the program of studies, we're saying we support Mandarin, and then to her point, we vote the budget, you also support it. I would also add that in the past, there have been, on rare occasions, if there have been concerns expressed by members of the WEA about courses and how they're run and how they're staffed, sometimes those concerns ultimately have come to the school committee level, because we're the ones who actually approve a course of study. So when we say, this is the class, this is how many credits, this is how it will run, if that does not happen the way that's prescribed, that has in the past come back to the administration and on a couple of occasions up to the school committee, since I suppose we're the ones who vote it, kind of the final arbiters. And I'll leave it as vague as I just left it on purpose. So,
Can I just add also?
Please,
that
yeah.
This is, I think, underscores the importance of doing curriculum reviews and having that sort of behind us as the basis for some of this decision-making.
Yes.
so,
I think Dennis wanted to jump in.
yeah, oh, I'm sorry, Dennis, go ahead.
I am actually a big fan of American Sign Language being offered at the high school level. It's a great alternative to kids that might struggle in the normal pathway with language-based disabilities or what have you in learning a new language. We did it in my last building. It is very difficult to find a certified teacher. It's one of those oddities that you think there would be a normal thing that it's easy to find, but it's not. It's difficult. Doesn't mean that it's impossible, but I'm a big proponent. I am a big proponent of adding Mandarin as well. Finnish, we'll have to wait for a little while. But
Yeah, no, everybody's looking at Susan.
There's a lot of intriguing research about children with language-based language language-based disabilities, being able to learn Mandarin and other pictographic.
Graphics.
The sign language I've seen big success with in
Cool.
in one of my previous lives, and it's something that, again, that would be an FTE,
Right.
but it's something that I would fully support at the high school level.
Does that count as a foreign, well, since we're on it, does that count as a foreign language for the state
If you
requirements?
want it to count, yes, it does count.
Okay, good to know.
So let's move on to the high school, but first, is there a motion to approve the 2019-20 McCall Program of Studies as amended with common language identifying override dependent new initiatives and the addition of world language for 7th graders?
So
So,
move.
I thought you were
Is there a
gonna say
second?
something else. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, James. Feel free to stick around if you don't have any other place to be tonight.
Bye, Jim.
Dennis, you're up.
So, a mini preamble, I know it's getting late in the night. There has been a lot of talk about prerequisites and barriers to entry, so that everybody understands publicly. I do support lowering the barriers to entry. Different levels for different classes. It is nice to have an expectation or guideline in a course of studies to say, this is what you should be earning or should be working towards in order to have success at the next level. But if a kid says, I wasn't really engaged, or I had a, significant health issue, or, I really want to take that class because I love the topic and it's something I'm passionate about, I do support that. And actually a number of our directors do as well, not to name any names, but some folks have prerequisites in here, and if a parent simply asks about overriding, it's granted. Some people do treat them as walls, though. Some people say that, no, you need to gain this in order to be at the next level, and that's based off of years of experience of a kid, year after year trying to move up a level or trying to stay in a level that they were really treading water in or sinking and not being successful. So it's born out of everybody having the best interests of the student, just looking at it in a different way. But as a leader of the building, there are conversations that we have had about lowering the barriers to entry, and I think we are moving towards that direction. We're just not fully there yet. So with our program of studies this year, we did talk about what do we want to add, what do we want to delete. We have, in years past, had a sort of bloated course of studies, meaning we've offered a lot of different classes over the years based off of student interest, based off of it's a living document, whether mostly in our history classes and in some of our science classes, what is the hot topic at the time, or what are kids interested at the time, and we've always left that work in our course of studies. Same thing with our music classes, and we're deciding to sort of pare things down, because when we offer this really large course of studies, and every year we get 2 or 3 kids that want to take this class. Well, it's in the course of studies, and they're invariably disappointed because they're the only 2 or 3 kids out of 1,400 that will take that class. So we might as well, after year, start to, we've seen students, in the less than 0.00% of the student body want to take a course or two. We're going to start to take these out and put them on the shelf and either revamp them and bring them back later, or just put them on the shelf until there's a call for them in the future. So a lot of our course of studies this year was looking at just removing things and streamlining things so that it's clearer, it's easier to read, and students aren't set up for disappointment, which they still may be depending on the override, depending on class sizes and our FTEs, whether the student can actually get into a class physically or not. But for the most part, they're not going to sign up for modern genocide, which I've always thought would be a fascinating class to take. I would have signed up for that, but it doesn't run year after year. It just doesn't run. We've had financial literacy classes. Sometimes they're full, sometimes they're not full, and it seems like a hot topic these days, but it's not something that has run in the past 2 years. It ran 3 years ago, and it was popular, but then it waned again. So we're always kind of trying to mix and match and see what we're able to offer based off the expertise of our faculty and the interests of our students. So in the bulleted sheet, you see a lot of classes that have been removed based off of student enrollment, and not in terms of numbers, those are always going up, but student interest. So the history of art and music classes shows up both in art and music. It's essentially those are one class that we're removing. That has a little bit to do with student interest and their ability to just squeeze it into a schedule, and also whether we have people that can teach it and cover the course appropriately. We were also removing Studio Art 2. That's just one of those classes that you get 3 or 4 kids in. It's very difficult to use a teacher to offer that class. The students that would typically be interested in the Studio Art 2 will still get very much that curriculum. Jen Levitino is fantastic with just doing a modified curriculum for where students are in their abilities in art. So students that are taking honors art or senior honors art will more likely will be exposed to that material or have an opportunity to do whatever the work would be in Studio Art 2 in that class. Mathematics, we updated the charts. We did start to use a bulleted line instead of a straight line. You'll see the honors math 10 stag is now listed on page 23. It just shows the opportunities in those classes. We are adding a statistics course for seniors that's open to anybody who wants to take it, no prerequisite required. Math is very flexible on the prerequisites and very open-minded in that regard. And so that statistics class is new. We'll see how it goes.
That's exciting.
That's awesome.
Statistics it's a modern conversation. Kids are more and more, particularly our students that are involved in athletics. The statistics is like it's just a topic all day, every day in their world. And our students that are focused on math, it's a conversation that they are interested in. Same thing with banking, advertising. It's just a conversation.
Research, science.
Yeah, you just go down the list. You go down the list.
It's right for performance-based assessments.
It is.
Jen says, rubbing her hands together.
Dr. Alamima, I get a sense I'll be filling out a lot of student surveys next year, and that'll be a lot of their hands-on work, which we look forward to. But that's open. So that goes with the students that don't want to take AP statistics. They can take regular statistics, and it's open to anybody. We added the drama classes. There's a placeholder in there right now because we're still deciding what those classes will look like, what they're going to be, and whether they'll run or not. So when we get common language for the middle school and high school, we'll add that in there as well. Science, we just updated the chart for 2019, 1920, and it is nice to have the opportunity to not have to take chemistry in the 10th grade. That's available. The marine science is available. It's in the chart now, so it's very clear. And then we're re-adding the Modern Middle East. That's been offered in past years. It hasn't run. Again, it's one of those classes that if I were a student, I'd be fascinated. But possibly I'd be fascinated as, adult Dennis Mahoney. Maybe in middle and high school I might not have been fascinated. Now it seems very interesting to me. But we have so many students that have mature adult conversations and are really focused on the world around them. Speaking to Ms. Marchand's, idea of what our history classes should be like, having conversations about what's truly going on in the Middle East versus what we see in the media or versus what people's opinions, that it's a great class to have. So there'll be, I'm sure, a lot of rich conversations. We hope that it passes.
Is there a reason you chose to separate it into both a CP, they chose to separate it into a CP and an honors? Is that one that you might expect?
That'll be
if you
a
didn't
dual
get
class.
enough kids, that they would both be in the same class and have different expectations?
I would say I'm 95% sure it'll all be in the same section.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not going to offer, I doubt we'd offer multiple sections, but we'll see what the enrollment is. And if we have to make adjustments, we'll make adjustments.
Okay.
And then Mandarin 3, we have tried Mandarin online. It has not been very successful. It's, we took some risks. It hasn't worked out great. The students not only struggle, but there's only 1 or 2 of them every year. So the Middlebury online language courses have been really good for us, but not in terms of Mandarin. It's just something that hasn't connected, and the enrollment is just not enough to run. So that's the updates. Keeping it simple this year.
So I'd like to just chime in with one quick question on the world language piece. Am I right, Jen, that my sense is most colleges and universities are looking for 2 full years of world language. Nobody's really looking for 3. So I'm thinking of those few kids who maybe started down the Mandarin path, and we take this away. Are we putting any kids in a position where they now can't take some electives they thought now they're going to have to shift to one of the other world languages?
It's already weaned itself out.
Yeah. Okay.
So speaking of colleges will never tell you their secret sauce. They might tell you like, oh, we like this, we like that, but they're never going to actually tell us the whole truth of what they're looking for.
Yep.
Because that would be advertised, and every student that would want to get there would give you them the exact information
Give you
that they
their
would look
menu.
for. So it's
Yeah.
very rare for them to say this is exactly what we want.
Okay. And it takes away their discretion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there are some common expectations, and 2 years of a language seems to be the most common.
Okay.
Can I ask a timeline question?
Sure.
So you said this would come out in around February to the students. So there's also some decision-making on the process of the students for their electives. And sometimes by ranking one elective, you lose the ability then to get into some other elective class you may have wanted. So for the students who choose drama, if drama ends up not running, will they be losing out on an opportunity to take something else?
Well, no, because the scheduling won't happen
I was
until
gonna
later.
say.
We have many conversations. The students all meet with their guidance counselor. So I
Right.
meet with the 8th grade parents the day we get back from February vacation. The next day in the middle school, I meet with the students, and that's the middle school component. At the high school level, within that week, if not the week before the vacation, guidance will start to meet in the auditorium with students to go over the course selection, and they start to set up their timeline to have conversations. And they go over what may or may not happen, what may or may not run, and then they schedule we basically take 2 months after that and have conversation, and we do rank them in Aspen.
Right.
But the ranking is,
Only one piece
all
of the
four of you
puzzle?
could be in the exact same grade, and you could all four say you want drama number 1. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it because of the way the algorithm will work behind the scenes in Aspen.
Okay.
You have a better shot of getting it, but if you want to take drama and French, and Ms. Marchand wants to take drama and band, and Dr. Ellen Neiman wants to take drama and Latin, it's really it's going to figure out what works best for all the students
To fit the schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And
I just wanted to
invariably-
make sure we weren't
No.
We always have disappointed students. I hate to see it. I would love everyone to get their top pick, but it does in the program of studies. It always says this: we guarantee your graduation requirements, and that's all we can guarantee you. And we take phone calls all summer long when a mom is upset because their student didn't get into AP psychology. It's like we can't put any more than the 30 plus kids that are already in there now.
So on that note, I know there was some concern from a parent or two in the fall when there was a class, it's not on your list here, I think it was a CAD class that's part of our STEM certificate selection, and I think it didn't run in part because we just didn't have the critical mass, maybe that was a part of it. So certainly graduation requirements are key, but I think and I think it's probably, is it still in here, a description of our STEM certificate?
Yes, it is. It's
Yep.
in the beginning.
So I think that to the extent we put that out there and say this is something we offer, there's obviously fewer classes that one can take to fulfill that. And in my mind, it puts a little more onus on us to find ways to make that run. And I appreciate all the time you put into addressing that particular concern. And maybe that was a fluke that I don't know that happens every year. So everything you said I agree with. We'd like to be able to run everything. We'll always have students that are disappointed, but it just reminded me for kind of smaller track programs for which there's a special graduation certificate. I guess the only thing we can do as a school committee is just know if we're resource strapped so we can have those conversations, right, around the budget. Because it's one thing if only one kid signs up, but I'd hate for you to be in a position where you find you just don't have the resources to do it, because that's really on us.
It becomes a mathematical problem for the school committee to think about. If you,
Right.
Yep.
I'll take all the FTEs you can give me. I'll take all for the district. Dr. Ellen even knows this.
We have to have another talk about that.
But if 20 some odd students out of 1,400 want a class, it's not a viable option. And I don't want to tell 20 kids they can't get it, but it's mathematically,
Right.
you're talking again about 0.01%. Less than that. I would need a calculator of the general population.
Right.
And it's not how I want to run a school, but it's how we
Yep.
are forced to do it.
Yep.
Maybe we could talk about those, some alternative classes, like if something doesn't run, it's not because the student wasn't choosing, like an STEM certificate.
I love online classes. I think there's a lot of value to them, but It really depends on the student. It depends on, so who's paying attention
But
to
I
it?
don't mean it has to be online, just an alternative, this is what we'd like for the STEM certificate, but if it
Sure.
doesn't run, we could.
I think Kathy Grace would be
Right.
get very creative in order, I mean, she's a big fan of the STEM certificate.
Yep.
She's, you know, it's #1 champion, so she would make something work.
Yeah. So I just had one comment, an observation, and then a question on the math classes that are added. And I feel like I should have picked up on this last year around this transition to STAG that Tom Haver had shared with us. My memory is that in some classes we distinguish between the difference between CP and honors with some note that just says some additional work is required. There's some effort, even though it's the same broadly, same scope. There's some effort to say either the class runs at a faster pace or there's more work that's required. And so as I look on page 24, I'm looking at STAG 10, for example. And Jen, this question is also sort of partly towards you, given the conversation we had around moving off of foundations and co-teaching. So we have, you know, granted not around math, but we have basically 3 identical course descriptions. One is college prep, one's advanced college prep, one's honors. So
It doesn't talk about the depth or the speed.
it doesn't. I mean, so I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, well, they look the same, so I'd be silly not to take the honors because I'm going to get more credit for that. And then as I went backwards, it's sort of the same is true for Math 9, I think. The descriptions are very, forgive me if I'm just comparing, I think the descriptions are identical too there for Math 9. I didn't think that was the case last year, but maybe I missed it. So I think some effort to just clarify what the distinction is in terms of expectations of students, whether that's pace of the class, additional work, something.
No
And
problem.
also if additional topics are covered in more depth.
Not a problem.
Is there a scope and sequence that exists for those classes?
You're talking about a syllabus, or you're talking about?
In the class itself?
No, because it's a class that, correct me if I'm wrong, Jen, this is a class that the math department has developed?
Correct. This is
So
brand
it's
new.
not based on a singular textbook or a singular background of information? Is there, especially to Chris's point, what he's pointing out, that, you know, it's not distinguishing between the advanced and the honors, does there exist a document that outlines
There does.
the topics and the depth at which they'll be covered in each of those classes?
The topics, yes. The depth, I'm not aware of it yet.
Okay.
But there's conversations that we can have to start to talk about that. And they don't actually have a book. They use, both 9 and 10 will use a little bit of a geometry book, a little bit of an algebra book. But they're more teacher creative materials as well. So it's something that I'm a fan of. Instead of going chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter
Right.
3, there's not a set, we're not following a set curriculum. It's teacher designed. But
Right.
there does need to be some more conversation on development.
But then did the kids have something to go back to look at for help if there's no,
There is for math for Stag 9 because
Yeah.
they worked on that last year. Stag 10, I know it's in process,
okay, thanks.
but in terms of depth, no, that's still a point of clarification.
I'm sure Tom could help you come up with something, right? Yeah, Zena, do you have a
I have
question?
a couple questions. So with this removal of Mandarin, now Mandarin will not be taught at all at the high school?
It was always an online course.
Okay.
It was never taught.
So when they say Mandarin 3, is that just like, where's 1 and 2?
It's already been phased out essentially.
Okay, got it.
We were letting those students finish.
Got it.
That
Okay.
was the basis of my earlier question. I want to be sure we're not stringing some kids along
Yeah,
in Mandarin
right.
and then sort of cutting off that
Okay.
opportunity.
And so if we are lucky enough to have the override pass and we bring in Mandarin back in the middle school, will you, if those kids are coming up and they're still interested, then we can look
Absolutely.
at it? Okay. And my last comment is, again, I would love to find out how we can support some broader, more in-depth, at the same time, study of more diverse authors and writing styles in English and writing.
So a lot of the books listed in the program of studies they're your traditional books, but they're not all the books that we offer. It's it's a bit of a misnomer.
Oh, okay.
We could provide a list of every book that kids would have access to. So like this year, Katie Pickett wrote a grant to the PFA for 30 copies of Hamilton. We're not going to put Hamilton in the program of studies, but they're going to access that during their English class. And Jerry Skinder, in his time here, always offered a Native American text or two in his classes. So teachers do have a lot of flexibility, and we purchase, you know, a classroom set of these, a classroom set of those. We do it through a grant, but we don't list them because it would be mixing and matching every year. And there is always some trepidation of adding a new book. Because it's your personal choice, you might love it, but then it doesn't really hold weight in the classroom and with the students. And we also get into the like I was thinking about this recently. Adopting a new book takes such a long time because you get to the book of 1,000 Little Pieces. I can't remember, and a lot of it was plagiarized, or a lot of it was fictionalized, and stuff that comes out after that. And we've already purchased 100 copies of the text. That it's difficult.
It's a good lesson in plagiarism, though. There's always something we can learn.
So we do offer a number of texts that don't show up there, and they mix and match every year.
Okay, so I guess I'm asking you as the expert, and Jen and Judy, as the experts, do you think we do a good enough job of teaching more a broader cultural world, and not just world, like within our own country, you know, Black America, Chinese Americans who've been here since way back in the 1800s. I mean, do we teach enough of those kinds of authors and perspectives?
I think we could always add more diversity. I mean, the phrase I'm predisposed to say when I hear good enough, cringe, because because good is the enemy of great, and I believe that. But I think we could always offer more diversity in everything that we do.
Okay. So any way we can help encourage that, please share.
All right, thank you all. So, Susan, yep.
Just have a question about dropping chamber singers. Is that something that people don't sign up for? Or
We changed the name, essentially. So it was that we had chamber singers, we had and now it's Sachem Choir. So we still have a number of singing opportunities for kids.
Okay.
It might have been called the
well, chamber singers
it might have been the Sachem
group,
Chorus,
okay.
but now it's Sachem Choir. We're not losing opportunities for kids to sing, for sure.
So chamber and octets used to meet after school, right?
Yes.
With this change,
Octets will still meet after school.
but
Again,
this other class now is incorporated within the typical block schedule?
It's nothing really new, though. We're already offering a chorus class.
Okay.
On Sachem Choir now, I think.
Okay.
And I think I counted more than 8 people in the octets group.
Well, yeah, I know that seems to. It's just a different experience being in a big choir or group.
I think it's a reference to the octaves. The number of people in there singing.
I was making a joke.
Okay.
Chris, she woke you up.
A little humor.
She was just checking to see if you were
musical
listening.
humor.
And I know we don't. I already
Call
made
them
a
the two
note
quartets.
about adding non-discrimination. I know we're working on a non-discrimination policy to include gender.
Later.
You have gender, so I didn't harp on gender identity and gender, I guess.
We can
But
use
yeah,
common language.
we'd
We
love
might as well.
we'd love to
We'd
see
love to
that.
see common language, yes.
Thank you so much for
So
that.
if there are no further questions, is there a motion to approve the Winchester High School Program of Studies as presented with common language for any override-dependent new initiatives and some expansion of math STAG course descriptions?
So
as Mr.
moved.
Mahoney sees fit?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, James and
Thank you,
Dennis.
gentlemen.
Thank you guys. Awesome work. Thank you.
Who said so moved?
Me.
I didn't hear.
Quietly from that side of the table. Okay, so then that
So
leaves us
unusual
under
for me.
reports and discussion, MSBA Statement of Interest submission. Judy, I'll ask you just to make some introductory remarks. The core replacement project window, it actually has opened, right?
It has, in
Yeah.
fact, opened, but it's open until April.
April 12th.
Says right here. So we don't have to make a decision tonight, just sort of introducing the topic. And should the committee so vote, Ellen and I will be prepared to resubmit 2 statements of interests with the continued prioritization of Lynch for the reasons we've talked about before, which include the larger program needs, the use of the swing space, the possible reconstruction on site, all of those things not available at Morocco. They are both extremely meritorious of renovation and replacement. The MSBA will require us to prioritize one submission if we make two. So I don't know, I think this is sort of my first informational piece, and if there are additional steps you would like us to take or to consider, just wanted to hear about that, or more information you need as we prepare to update our submissions.
So I have and just a process comment. The way we've done this in the past is staff will work hard to update whatever we had for SOIs, but we don't actually, any actual vote to submit would come much later when they're actually ready to be submitted.
Correct.
And anything that substantially changed, I mean, we copies are made electronically to the committee, we highlight changes, kind of like the whole discussion we just had around program of studies, actually. So we do that well enough in advance so we get feedback. Tina?
So I would like to propose, this is not my original idea, I can't take credit for it, but I would like to propose that we convene I don't know if this is the right setting, like a public hearing or some format where we can have a conversation with our town and our parents on whether or not they would prefer a Lynch and a separate Morocco, or one Lynch and one Morocco. There are benefits and drawbacks to either one of those situations. I really don't think we should make that decision without having a conversation with the parents, especially Morocco parents who are now with this operating override that we're asking the town to pass. That's just going to push Morocco, I don't know what's realistically 10, 15 years out. I really think this is a broader conversation, and I think if Judy and Ellen agree, I think we have plenty of time between now and April 12th to convene a quick meeting, at least to feel the temperature in the town on one Lynch, a combined Lynch and Morocco. And the way the place where I used to live in Illinois, how we had it was a combined school in terms of where it was on the lot, and they shared an auditorium and I think a cafeteria space, I'm not sure, but there were two different administrations. I mean, they were still run like two schools, but they had shared resources, and I just don't feel comfortable asking Morocco parents to hold off without truly having this conversation with them. Judy?
Comments?
Well,
Silence the
there's silence.
room.
I
was waiting to see.
It occurs to me that, we did go through the careful and extensive process of having a master plan. However, a lot of time has gone by.
And did that master plan include focus groups specifically from Lynch and Morocco parents to put this proposal to them? Because I don't know that history since I wasn't on the board.
I wouldn't say focus groups on that particular question, but there were a number of community meetings where we talked specifically and explicitly at length about how to address the shortfall, well, a couple of things. How to address an aging physical plant at Lynch and Morocco, how to address our growth as a district. We looked at many interesting ideas, including, but not limited to, the idea of a sixth grade academy at McCall, right? So one alternative to this that you heard tonight about phase 1, phase 2, there was another idea that we looked at early, which was don't touch McCall, just move sixth grade out.
Okay, but that's
Send
not
sixth
Lynch and
grade.
Morocco.
That's not Lynch
But
and
I'm
Morocco.
coming,
Okay.
I'm
He's
heading
saying
there.
there's
Okay.
other options.
So that would put sixth grade at Lincoln. And then the question was, well, now what do you do with Lincoln? And because we had already begun to actually study a combination school for Lynch and Morocco, that was one of several kind of concepts. So when you talk about combination school, we've actually looked at a Lynch-Morocco combination. We even looked at a Lynch-Morocco-Lincoln combination. And both of those were actually shared with the community. In both instances, there was very strong support towards our neighborhood schools.
I understand.
But from some of it, I think is, I think there were some subjective reasons why and some objective reasons why. There are some cost issues that are tied to, either replacing them individually or a combination. There are cost issues in terms of first cost, capital cost, but also on the operating side. And so I would say it's been, to Susan's point, it's been 3 years-ish since we were talking about that. On the other hand, I think we asked a lot of the right questions, and we actually did engage the community and kind of got to where we are.
So anecdotally, of course I don't have the statistics, but anecdotally, I understand that a combined Lynch Morocco burdens traffic, especially in my neighborhood. I get that. But there's been a few changes. First of all, enrollment, the scare of 40Bs and all of that hasn't happened. Not to say it won't happen, but so some of those projections haven't really been as scary as people were worried about. The demographics of the town has changed. There's a lot of younger families that have moved in. So I would just like to take a new temperature of how people feel, because I think if we do one build, there's room for innovation. So something like the 6th grade academy, I heard about that and I looked into it and I had a conversation, and people were saying the reason 6th grade academy wasn't a good idea because separating the 6th graders out of the elementary and the middle school now creates yet another transition, which is difficult enough for kids. So there were great reasons why that wasn't done. Now, with the state of the town as it is, I think we just owe the town conversation. Because there's been a lot of changes, and depending on the override and all of that, I want to hear from the town what they want us as a school committee to do. And I know I love my neighborhood school. I'm a Lynchy. I get it. I can walk. I understand how Morocco parents will feel, but I want to give them that opportunity to tell me, listen, we don't care if we have a newer school. We want to be able to walk to our school. Or we don't care that we can walk to our school. We definitely want newer facilities. I can't speak for them. I can speak for me. I'm a Lynch parent for the next few years. I know what I want, but I'm not here to talk about what I want. I want to talk about what everybody wants as a town, especially with all of the override, the operating override, and then we're going to ask for a building debt override and another one. So that's just something we have to have a conversation about in my term, because I wasn't there 3 years ago to have that conversation.
And an honest look perhaps back at the master plan to see what those timelines are and which of the timelines are still accurate and what phase we've moved to for Lynch and Morocco, and sharing those also with the community, because we continue to talk about Lynch and then Morocco as if they're both inevitable and coming soon. And that's the message I think a lot of parents are hearing, is we're going to do Lynch, then we're going to do Morocco, and things are going to be improved. So but I don't know how realistic that timeline really is, or what the face of the MSBA is looking like, and our ability to get one approved shortly after another.
To chime in on that then, the schedule piece, and I'm glad you brought that up. So we actually had 4 different schedule scenarios in the master plan. The first was extremely optimistic, which was they're going to say yes to rebuild. By the way, we put the schedule scenarios together after the school committee 2.5 years ago voted to select Lynch first. That was not to be very clear, it was not a master plan recommendation. The master plan says you need to replace both. It's the MSBA that says, okay, you can make that request, but you have to pick one. And by the way, even though you may pick one, the MSBA may actually choose to look at both, and for any number of reasons say,
Choose the other.
and we're going to choose the other one. And sometimes that's actually the economics, because they just have a limited bucket of money, to work with. So at any rate, so we had 4 different schedule scenarios in the master plan. The first was that really optimistic one that said MSBA will be ready to move even before we've even approved the master plan. That did not happen. So then we were on to schedule 2, which was when they just came and looked at Lynch in the fall. They've asked us to get back in line, but it's encouraging that they came to look. And so now we look at scenario 3. And in each case, those scenarios map out a very reasonable time frame for feasibility study, design, and construction for both. So there is a timeline for Lynch, followed by a timeline for Morocco. So I would suggest that the master plan certainly doesn't say we're going to do one and then immediately do the other, nor has that been our practice in town. However, that certainly doesn't stop people from having that understanding. And that actually happened 10 years ago, I believe, when, very quickly we're off to the races to do things like the modulars I mentioned earlier, right, at Morocco
Right.
and in Ambrose. And there were people pretty quickly who said, well, when are we doing the high school? Well, the high school's not actually supposed to come next. We have to do, VO. So,
But
I
those
think-
happen pretty quickly in a row. VO and the high school,
VO did not happen quickly.
like
No,
between
the high
VO
school
and the high
after VO.
school. And now people are talking about Lynch and Morocco. So
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
the perception is
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
expected, I guess.
Right. Yep. So that's a good point. I mean, I think there can certainly be value in having, a presentation and getting some feedback about. We could certainly look. We have some fact we can present, which is this is what was talked about at the master plan, and this is kind of what the recommendations were. This is what we've done in the past, and here's why. I would say, Zena, above and beyond things like distance to school and walking versus driving. And I'm totally with you. I think if you have a larger school, there might be some synergy in terms of specialists and administration and so forth.
Especially with our special ed budget.
Right.
growing.
That's true. So I think one important element to keep in mind that came up during the master plan was this idea that we've all kind of acknowledged that enrollment growth was not this bubble that was imminently going to pop. We keep growing, but there is an acknowledgement that at some point it has to stop. We're still growing at double digits over 10 years, but we're not growing as fast as we used to, right?
Right.
So one of the factors, not the primary one of the factors I think that supported the idea of doing the two schools was we learned very strongly, and I asked Susan to weigh in if she feels differently, but I think during the redistricting piece, we learned how much this community loves their neighborhood schools, and that we also identified the Mystic site is a place where if we continue to grow at the rate we're growing now for another 10 or 15 years, that we would look towards, maybe a sixth neighborhood elementary school, which if we need it, then we could pull that trigger.
Well, we've
But
talked about a lot of
alternatively,
those.
but the alternative is interesting, which is, and this was an argument against the big combination school, is you're really making a commitment in sort of the present to build a really large school for enrollment growth that may not happen. Remember, we have a 10-year master plan. We always feel more confident about the 5-year outlook than the 10-year. So we can say with more confidence today how many kids we think are going to be here in 2 or 3 years. With less confidence, 8, 9, 10 years out. So if this is making sense, there was some pushback, which was that's a huge investment in a school and you're building capacity, which ultimately maybe is not necessary by the time you would have gotten to that second school, whether it was Lynch or Morocco, right, whichever order they were to come in. But these are all things that we could certainly talk about in a public meeting. But the other word of caution I might have is, I think for me personally, I think explaining sort of what the master plan says, what we've done in the past and why, is all good. I think, in my opinion, this committee should indicate to the community what our intentions would be going forward, or if we ask for feedback that we're framing it that way, that we don't, I would not want to go so far as to say, tell us what we should do, because I think that can become pretty divisive. I think you would find there are going to be some Lynch parents who are going to say, we want a Lynch school and we want you to build it first. Or Morocco parents that may say, want a Morocco school, we want you to build it first. I mean, you may just
Well,
find.
you're getting into the how do we present, and I don't think we're at that level, right?
I think there were words you used a moment ago, which is, I'd like to hear what the community thinks we should do. And I think as leaders, we need to hear what people feel, what they're excited about, right? What they're concerned about, what their values are, what their priorities are. But it's up to the committee to then decide, sort of digest all that and find kind of that path forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point you're preaching to the choir, but at the same time, it's their money, they've elected us, then they can lay out what they think is good. I mean, we're going to get opposing views, opposing costs, all of that. That's what we take back, and with the experts in the room, we have that conversation. So you're right on how we present, but there's a lot of history, and it's something that I think is just important in general to have at this point. So I'm happy to work with Judy to set something up. I'm happy to do it.
Well, I would argue that it goes beyond Lynch and Morocco parents, because all of Winchester will be paying for
exactly.
it, too.
Exactly my point.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it is something that I just want to know if you guys are on board, and if so, then what are the next steps, Judy?
I
Any
think
final thoughts before I say next?
More transparency is
Mhm.
better than less. and
Exactly. I agree.
Have a conversation
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
is a good idea.
Okay.
Right, so just a couple of thoughts. If our school district continues to be as high-performing as it is, I think we'll continue to have people moving into town to go to school here. And the likelihood of a large 40B happening, I think is very real. And I know there's a perception that we're overbuilt, but we're certainly not compared to the communities I've lived in before, including where I grew up in Somerville. And if we continue to be, we have a housing production plan that will take us some way there, but I really am very concerned that we're going to get a large influx of students all at the same time through one large development that's going to tax our capacity. So the reality is we're going to need to redistrict or have some form of modified redistricting in any case, no matter whether we renovate or replace Lynch or Morocco or both. And so part of any public discussion has to be around that idea, is that people get very invested in their neighborhood schools and move to town, in fact, thinking they're going to be in one district, and sometimes find to their surprise that this side of the street is Morocco and not Lynch, or vice versa. And so, so part of any review of the master plan, sort of a check-in after 3 years before we resubmit a statement of interest, seems like a good idea. And whether or not the current parents and students at Morocco and Lynch should have a stronger voice in this than the wider community is important to decide, although most of those students are in middle school
That's a
before
good
anything
point.
happens at
Right.
all.
That's why I like Michelle's point, is make
Yeah.
it more of a community
It's more of a
conversation.
community conversation.
Yeah, that's.
And I think we should not make assumptions. The only assumption we can make is that a combined school cannot fit on the Morocco property, that a combined school could be located on the Lynch property or somewhere else. School of that size, I think, probably will not fit
We
on
actually,
Morocco.
but we did look at a combination school on the Morocco site, but it triggers a massive swing space requirement, which is
Didn't you
not
also look at one on Leonard Field?
We didn't really look at Leonard
No, we
Field.
did
No,
explored.
okay.
Yeah, but I mean, that's, or some other site. So I guess we should be careful about what the assumptions are. So the
Yeah.
question of, will you
Right.
be able to walk to school?
Yeah.
And what school you'll be assigned to are two very open questions,
Right.
depending on
Right.
whether we get a large. Even in the event of a large 40B, we have the capacity within existing policy to assign students to a different school, not the school closest to
Yeah,
them. So
right.
we have the flexibility. I was not here when the last redistricting happened. I think anybody here is still on the school committee when that happened, two of you, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't, but.
You were not? No, so only
What?
Chris. The fact that he lived through it is kind of a miracle.
Where all my gray hair
Well,
came
that's
from.
what I was thinking,
Yeah.
that it,
It's
you
been
know,
a while.
just to have people
Yeah.
understand that a redistricting is something that happens periodically, and
Right.
it's
And
not
it's time.
necessarily fun,
Kinda like
but
our
just-
override
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, it's like an override. It's
No,
not
there's some
fun. It
communities-
comes
Yeah.
every so often,
Some
but we have
communities
to.
redistrict a little more frequently, so it's less of an issue.
Or some districts will have like buffer zones,
Yeah.
so that.
Yeah.
They do. They have a sort of modified choice.
I
So-
just feel like we're a little bit disconnected from the community at large with all of this information.
Yep.
Right.
I just
me
want to
too.
have that conversation and
So-
presentation
Completely
and all
agree.
that.
In terms of next steps, I think we should, I want Brian to sort of come up to speed. I don't know if
Right.
he
Right.
texted me, he said he could see us, but he couldn't hear us, so this is sort of useless. So he
What a
needs to come
treat.
up, he needs to come up to speed. Imagine the
Right.
meeting he's having and the floor he's sitting on with hundreds of people waiting on a flight. So the other thing too, Zena, is I think we need to be, I think it's really important I think Susan was just touching on this. So what information do we present to the community is really important. There were things that we know, and there are things that we kind of don't, and then things we sort of have hunches on.
Right.
So I would offer that because the MSBA just works with a fixed pot of money, and they were pretty explicit about this when they did the Lynch walkthrough,
Right.
is that in any given year, when a community submits a really compelling high school proposal or a middle school proposal, right, Ellen, that makes less money available for
Right.
elementary schools. a combination school, and there are a couple of versions that are actually in the back of the master plan, is a much more expensive proposition. So aside from the politics of some